Does he have it?
Medeiros is going to get it.
Haven't got it!
He's on the outside line though, going into the fastest corner on the circuit. Surely this can't work.
Dominic Ligner has got a sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's caught back into play. Exactly, Miller's still start trouble. He's not on second and change. All of a sudden Miller's back in play.
Can Barry do it? Big Barry's gonna do it! Big Barry!
Buongiorno tutti! Hello everybody and welcome to the most incredible speed thriller fest of a circuit in the entirety of Europe. The Autodromo Nazionale Monza. They call this place the Temple of Speed on purpose. It is a fabulous location and a great venue for the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. We're just over the halfway point in the 2023 calendar, and this is an absolutely fantastic circuit to bring the Hypercars and the GT3 AMs to come and play. And what a battle it's going to be for the 60 minutes of Monza as the drivers and teams from the regular Virtual World Sports Car Championship 2023 Hypercar and GT season will lock horns and cross swords on this fabulous race circuit. It's mixed conditions potentially over the course of the evening. It's very hot, of course. The European heat wave is there or thereabouts, but there is a weather front potentially trying to eke its way onto the circuit. And when it rains at Monza, it properly rains at Monza. So we'll try and keep that one on the back burner if we possibly can. But the air temperature is sky high, 29 degrees Celsius at this moment in time. The track is up to a dizzying 46, which definitely means it's going to be pretty tricky in terms of tyre management. And that's one of the key factors, as always, in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. If you're new to this category, well, you've picked a fine time to come in, actually, because this is going to be a very interesting battle hors d'oeuvre for the remainder of the season. Until we get to the meaty chunks of the main course of this 2023 campaign. We've obviously had some of the bigger events in the calendar, but we've got a very nice banzai to the end of the championship season. Let's take a look at the calendar for the 2023 season and see what you've missed as well as what you've got coming up. We've obviously been to Daytona in California, to Portimao in Portugal, to Sebring and to Long Beach in the United States, to Spa in Belgium, to Le Mans for the 2.4 hours, not quite the full catering, of course, the 4.8 hours in the VWSC category, because we have the NAIRS on Thursdays and the VWSC on Saturdays. Then we had Watkins Glen. That was a full 60 laps of the course, and the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, also known as Mosport, for 1 hour. And here we are at Monza for 60 minutes of the course. And then look at the circuits we've got coming up in the calendar. An absolute joy to behold. Road America at Elkhart Lake in the United States, Fuji Speedway in Japan, Indianapolis, the great place for the race, Road Atlanta, and Bahrain on the Sakhir circuit at Manamar. A fabulous run-in for the rest of the season, and certainly the right time to be getting involved in this championship. But we are here at the Autodromo Nazionale Monza with its fabulous corners, its incredibly tight twisting apexes, and its dangerously high speeds. Into the Rettifilio, the drivers will go on the brakes big time from that flowing fast straight onto the Curva Grande, where they go wheel to wheel and mix it all the way down to the Variante della Roggia. You and I will know it as the second chicane. Quick left right flick and then up to the 2 Lesmo, very tight in radius, the second slightly quicker than the first, but then it's onto the Seraglio and that's where you really start to build some speed. Then you've got to be very cautious, but also quite aggressive over the curbs at the Ascari chicane. It's a left, right, left flick. You've really got to attack the curbs there. Then down the back straight and all the way on to what is now known as the Variante Alboreto, named after Michele Alboreto, the great Formula 1 and sports car driver. Of course, the old schoolers like you and me know it as the Parabolica. It's quite tight on entry, but still a fast entry point, and then it really opens up the taps. And if you're a little bit wide, that dust will really kick you into a big spin, and at high speed you're really going to struggle it. So here are the tyre compounds that the two categories of race car will use over the course of today's race. Hypercars are restricted to either softs or mediums, and they really have to be quite frugal in how they manage and look after the tyres over the duration of the 60 minutes. It'll be interesting and a very integral part of the strategy as to when to switch from soft to medium. You've got to try and maximize all of the tire life that you possibly can. GTs have a little bit more freedom. You've got soft, medium or hard, and that obviously gives them a little bit more to play with. Both classes, of course, have a wet tire that they can use. Wet, not intermediate. So again, if it does rain at any point in the race, making the decision when to switch to wets is actually quite critical, because there'll be parts of the circuit that will be drier than they are wet, and you've got to try and maximize lap time over the course of this circuit. That's just one of the intriguing factors of this particular circuit and this particular round of the championship. What are the main challenges within the Virtual World Sports Car Championship? Well, they are threefold for the layman. You've obviously got traffic management to deal with, not just between Hypercar and GT3, but also between the two individual classes of Pro and Am across both Hypercar and GT3 Am. So you've got two types of traffic to work your way around. Mixed weather, obviously we use a genuine weather satellite, so whatever is happening at the circuit we're racing at is also going to be happening in sim, and at the moment it's fair weather conditions, but there is a weather front moving across to this part of northern Italy, so it could play a part in the race. And of course, the varying fuel strategies. Now, we reckon, our spies have told us, that there's going to be probably amongst the Hypercars 2 pit stops and a bit, which is definitely going to make things very interesting over a 60-minute race, trying to call who is going to pit and when at any particular time is going to be fascinating. So we could have 2 regular length pit stops followed by a quick splash and dash in the final 10 minutes. Here are the standings up to this point of the championship. In the LMGT3 Am category, it's been 3 wins for the Ferrari of Eugene Mazur. There have been wins apiece as well for Stephen Miller's McLaren, Peter Mayer in the Mercedes, Filippo Marazzi's Ferrari, and the BMW M4 GT3 of Craig Pullen. But in terms of the championship fight, it's the 3 M's, Mazur, Miller and Mayer, that have been the closest. And then, of course, the Boyces, Mike and Matt in their Hurricanes, are trying to keep tabs on them, but slowly drifting a little bit away from the top spot. And in terms of the teams, well, Trash Panda Racing in the Lamborghini Huracan have the strength in numbers to run at the front end of the field, and they have 133 points between them, ahead of the Reptile Racing BMW M4 GT3 squad, made up of Adam Gray and Craig Pullen. It'll be interesting to see how that continues on here at Monza in LMGT3. The main category, it's Vasilis Katerinakis who has the championship lead, but only by 6 points from the very consistent Brandon Gant in the GT3 Nismo. He hasn't won a race yet, but his point score has been immaculate, and he is only 6 points back from the 2-time winner Vasilis Katerinakis, who is part of the championship leading Stardust Autosports team in their Acuras. It's not just Katerinakis and Gant though. Jamie Zalewski is right there in 3rd position, just a point away from Gant. JT Tammy and Johnny Gutierrez, who have both won 2 races apiece in their Aston Martin Vantage and Mercedes cars respectively, they are there in the top 6, as is Becky Ely, part of the Stardust Autosports team, and Sachin Sobers and Eliseo Neto in their Mercedes and Bentley Continental GT3s have also been race winners this year. It's one of the most competitive of the classes in the Virtual World Sports Car Championships, and with 3 drivers separated by 7 points at the top and several rounds still to go, this title could go anybody's way. Bring it on. In the Hypercar category, it is very close again up at the front. Despite the 4 wins for Wayne Hutchison in the Porsche 963, he only has a 14-point advantage over Philip Henrique in his Acura ARX. He has taken just the 1 win so far this season, as has Guillermo Benchke in the Cadillac and Barry DiMarzo in his Acura. And then there has been a one-off victory for the Ferrari 499P of Robert Strachan, but that is the only major appearance for a Ferrari up at the top spot so far. So with the Porsche, Acura and Cadillac sharing the wins over the course of the season, it's very close indeed between the Stewart-Haas Racing and HPD squads up at the sharp end. Look at that, 2 points between the teams. So it's close in the drivers, but even closer in the teams category in Hypercar AM, and that could rumble all the way to the end of the season. Meanwhile, in the Hypercar Pro category, well, if Dan Kirby hasn't had his breakfast this morning, they're going to close in on him, but they won't take the lead off him this time. He's had a very strong season up to this point. 4 wins and 190 points puts him and the CMS Pro team, incidentally, at the firm top of the table, courtesy of the man second in the championship with 2 wins, John Uyan, in his Peugeot 9X8. Tom Lane and Mia Rose have been steady and consistent. Mia Rose actually winning twice over the course of the season herself, and Wouter de Bruyn in the BMW Hybrid doing a fabulous job earlier in the season to grab his and the Rookie Monsters' sole victory of the season. But their consistency actually puts them second in the Teams Championship behind CMS Pro at this point, with the SKS Motorsport Acuras and the HPD Acuras giving chase. But so far, it's all about trying to catch up with Dan Kirby, hoping that he has a bit of a bad run and they can start to chip away. However, there's only going to be 1 or 2 drivers that will make a big leap forward to him, and certainly the title battle looks to be not done, but certainly in the hand of Dan Kirby. It's that fight for second between John Uyan, Tom Lane and Mia Rose, as well as Timon Suvic, actually, he's there in 5th position, that will really start to jog on a pace as the final rounds of the championship kick in. But can any of them catch up to Dan Kirby? Well, there is the million-dollar question. We will have to see as the races themselves play out here at Monza. It's definitely going to be an intriguing battle as the contenders are gearing up ready for the qualifying session. The practice is just coming up to an end, and you can see Dan Kirby in the CMS Pro Peugeot, who has been the class of this field in 2023 so far. He hasn't exactly dominated the whole season, but with 4 wins, he's definitely the man to watch and certainly the man in top form. He can make it a 5th win here today at Monza, but there is a whole squadron of competitors that will try and take it off him. Welcome to the broadcast. I'm Jake Sanson. Beside me is Dan Pepples. We could have some insight from Ross Smith. And of course, your broadcast director is James Parfitt. We're going to bring you all of the coverage of every single minute of the 60 minutes of Monza in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. Dan the man, how are things going?
Yeah, good. Welcome, Jake. Yeah, I'm feeling great about this race today. It's a beautiful venue to be at, this Monza circuit. Actually, got a bit of Italian blood as well, so I'm right at home here at the Temple of Speed. Of course, have been here in real life as well once. I have to say, it's a great venue. Also, the history that this track has. So it's great to be here with the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. Daniel Kirby leading the way here in practice. Who is going to be the one to stop him? Timon Suvic has gotten close, but behind that, it's an 8/10 gap back to Bradley Sellers, which is humongous in this class.
I mean, this is just a fabulous location. As you say, it just oozes history. They just passed their centenary year in 2022, 100 years of Monza. And it really is quite astonishing to consider that for the past century, drivers, young and old, in various different categories and disciplines of motor racing have been trying to hit the limits of what their machinery can cope with, both virtual and real. And it's definitely going to be very exciting to see what our drivers can do as Dan Kirby makes a very rare error in judgment at the Variante della Roggia in practice. Better in practice than in qualifying, but it just shows you just how heavy and how aggressive you've got to be in terms of the brakes there. But it is very easy to lock them up, and we've been seeing quite a few lockups through the run-up to this race, Dan, in terms of practice, as these first 2 chicanes at Rettifilio and della Roggia, very hard to nail.
Now, these hypercars are not quite prototypes. They're a little bit heavier, thus more difficult to stop. Plus, they don't have the aids of ABS that the GTs have. So, actually, we had a bit of trouble with it last time out, of course, at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. A very short track, so they lap the GTs about every 4 or 5 laps. And the problem was with the hypercars that, of course, the braking performance of a GT is actually better than that from a hypercar. So trying to overtake into the braking zone was a bit difficult for these hypercars. It's actually one of the only and the first time for me, for sure, as Brian Hall has a bit of a moment going into the Della Roggia, to see the higher class cars actually having a deficit in the braking zone.
This is definitely going to be an intriguing qualifying session because you tend to find at Monza, especially in previous runnings and outings in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship, when there have been previous runnings in previous categories, this is a place that does not reward mistakes. It's very, very tight around some of these curbs, and it can spit you off before you even realise the car has gone lost. So it's a tricky one to get right in qualifying. You really have to nail every braking point. You have to get the up change and down change just right. If you miss a shift by a fraction of a second, that can cost you a critical couple of kilometers an hour at the right point to really gain you a little bit of speed. And we're talking hundredths and thousandths of a second that you're trying to find around this course. So it's about perfection. And as you can see from the sparks that are coming off Alexander Schultz's car, you know, ride height is also quite critical here because there is a little bit of an elevation and undulation change here, but not much. It's mainly due to the bumpy nature and the aggressive abrasion of the surface here at Monza. That can really add its own dynamics here, Dan, and you'll see a lot of drivers slipping and sliding in the early phase. As the race goes on, there'll be a lot of mistakes creeping in, like that one.
Just like that. Yeah, it's of course, the lower you can run the car, the better and the quicker the car will run. But it's trying to get that just right where the car doesn't bottom out too much, because of course that's scrubbing across the asphalt, and that's going to slow you down as a result. So trying to get that just right, as Alexander Schultz has a bit of an off into Ascari. We have come to the end of the practice session, going into qualify now, so the GT3s will be going out first. But it's getting that balance of running the car as low as possible, but not too low. Getting that right is so difficult, but also so crucial at this track.
So as we gear up ready for time qualifying, the question and the debate starts to rear its head. Has Dan Kirby got a pole position in his pocket, or is going to have a little bit more pressure than that coming into Monza? It's always easy to kind of look at the championship leader and the current form they're in and make a judgment based on the upturn and swimming fortunes. You know, are they going to have the best pace? Well, I'm going to have to wait and see, but we're not going to find out the answer to that one just yet, because in qualifying in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship, it's a 20-minute session, but the first 10 minutes are exclusively for the GT cars. So they make their way out of the pit lane. Now, interestingly, that's one car that's come out of the pit and then crossed the white line on exit. So obviously it's a little bit less strict generally in sim racing competitions than that. But if this was the world of racing, that would certainly be a slap on the wrist, nay, a fine for that particular driver on that one. So already drivers are taking their own unique approach to the qualifying session. But they've only got 10 minutes, and they've got to make sure that these cars are absolutely up to temperature in terms of brake temperature, in terms of tyre temperature. So this outlap and then the first installation lap, if you will, critical to making sure you get the most out of your machinery.
Talking about machinery, for Dan Kirby, there's one car that I would say would be very quick here, and that would be the Peugeot. Of course, got no rear wing, so technically you would say a car without a rear wing. It's very slippery in a straight line. We're going to see if that is indeed the case. John Ewan also in the Peugeot. Don't know if he's here though this evening. I haven't seen him yet. Of course, second in the championship. He is here, I'm being told. So yeah, maybe him or for John Ewan, it's going to be a chance to take away a pole position from Dan Kirby, because he has got quite a few already. Into the GT qualifying then, leader in the GT3 championship, Vasilis Katranakis in the LMGT3 Pro Championship, and in the LMGT3 AMS is Eugene Mazur. So interesting to see where those two are going to end up. Eugene, a bit of a bigger lead than Vasilis has in the championship. Vasilis is only 6 points back to Brandon Jans and Jamie Zilecki. So I think the Pro Championship is going to be one to watch, because it's always close there.
So obviously they're dialing themselves in now for a fast run. As you look at Eugene Mazur, one of the championship contenders, who is trying to put himself into the best position and has already tucked himself into the slipstream of the McLaren up in front of him. Very nice tactics there from Eugene Mazur. But that's the problem you do have. The McLaren put him off there under brakes. And that's a lap that's very much been spent already from Eugene Mazur. Tactics do play into a part to a certain extent here in qualifying. And Eugene Mazur was hoping to use the McLaren slipstream to good effect. But they bailed out of the brakes there. So this is not going to be Eugene Mazur's quickest lap.
so easy to do. You kind of want to line yourself up behind someone who you know is about as quick as you, and that is a bit of that's very optimistic, as we see one of the cars also on the left-hand side of the circuit. A bit of an optimistic dive. It was Sashin Sobers who was off the track there on the left-hand side. Eugene Mazur wanted to get past, got past, but not on the conventional way. Goodness me, almost lost it on the exits of the second Lesmo. And it's so easy to do there, especially if you dip a tire into the gravel there, Jake, I have to say. You see multiple incidents where a car just misjudges the exit a bit and just ends up on the right-hand side of the circuit, and sometimes even bounces back into the middle.
Yeah, that was definitely the need for speed line there for Eugene Mazur, wasn't it? I'm afraid that's not really going to help him out here. And, we've had somebody actually losing it out of the Variante Ascari and into the wall further back. So that's on the first flying lap as well. So that's really gone badly wrong for, that looked to me, I couldn't quite make out, was that a Nissan that went off there at the background?
I think that was, and that is big, of course. He's there, of course, together with Vasilis Katrinakis and Brandon Johnson in the LMC3 Pro Championship. So that is a warm-up lap and a quick lap lost for him, if it wasn't the part. And the thing with that is he's now got to do another warm-up lap. That's going to take so much time out of his qualifying session, and you've only got 10 minutes.
Yeah, this is really running the gauntlet, isn't it? As we look at Jamie Zalewski trying to dial himself up to good speed in the hope that he's got a fast but also a consistent car underneath him. Look at that as they dive through the curbs. This is what I was talking about, how much aggression you've got to carry at the limit of adhesion. And it's quite common here, certainly at the Variante della Roggia and sometimes at Variante Ascari as well, to have 2 on the deck and 2 in the air as you try and fly your way through. And even at the second Lesmo, as Jamie Zalewski proves there, very tricky to get these cars acting to their best ability. But as we look at things at the moment, Becky Ely is the one with the fastest time in the Acura NSX. So Becky Ely has the best time at the present moment. She's in front of Brendan Warner. And then Vinicius Gonçalves in third position in front of John Mayer. And then James Walker in front of Alain Lefrancois. Josh Lepetri, and then JT Tammy in front of Adam Gray and Stephen Miller, but there's still plenty of decent times to come in. We still haven't seen the best of Sachin Sobers. We still haven't seen this man's pace yet, Jamie Zalewski, and Eugene Mazur's time has not come up either yet for the Pazuzu Ferrari because he's not really been at pace as yet. JT Tammy comes through and outpaces Alain Lefrancois, but what about Jamie Zalewski? What will he do as he comes across the line this time here at Monza? A relatively clear lap. So the time will now be a 1:47 as he crosses the line. A 1:47.8, not particularly competitive. So now he's going to go into his fast lap as Stephen Miller crosses the line to come through. And Stephen Miller has obviously started the banker as Stuart Barge has come up into third position in the HPD Acura. He's gone 0.7 of a second off the pace of Becky Ely and the fabulously named Gilles Villeneuve, whether it's a nomenclature or whether it's genuinely a chap whose name happens to be Gilles Villeneuve. Well, we'll find out later, of course. But what a fabulous name if it is. Lexus RCF GT3, 2.2 seconds off the pace as Josh Lepetri now creeps up into third place to make it 3 different manufacturers in the top 3, even if it's brief, because we have Becky Ely in the Acura, Brendan Warner in the Mercedes, and Josh Lepetri in the McLaren. Back on board, this time with Jamie Zalewski, and he's definitely soaring away at the wheel at the more aggressive apexes.
Scoring not all too stable going through the second Lesmo into Ascari now. This is a crucial corner because you want to get the exit just right so you can get good speed onto the following straight. Also the entry, so difficult, or is it the sausage curves on the inside there? Takes all of them on the exit as well. And like you said, 2 wheels up in the air. Let's see what his time is going to be. He's purple in the middle sector though. This could be a good lap. And the lap that we were waiting for, Becky Ely, not all too surprising, already up there once again. Winner last time out, of course, at Mosport. Through the last corner, where's James Leckie going to put himself once a good starting position for this race? Turn 1, so damn important for this race. Of course, such a tricky one. Jumps up into P2, 47.811 Not quite the 47.250 he was looking for.
But interestingly, up to second position behind Sachin Sobers, who has also displaced Becky Ely. So Sachin Sobers in the Mercedes has gone top spot. There's Eugene Mazur in the Pazuzu Ferrari, who has gone 9th position with his first effort. So that's there or thereabouts, isn't it? It's not too far away, as Alain Lefrançois has now come through to displace JT Tammy and Gilles Villeneuve in front of Adam Gray, and then Stephen Miller in his 720S McLaren. But certainly at the top spot at the moment, it is the Mercedes AMG of Sachin Sobers, who has done a time, get this, half a second quicker than anybody else at this point. There is Sachin Sobers, who is purple in Sector 1 again, so definitely starting to stretch the legs of the AMG GT3 car. It's still one of the most versatile GT3 cars in the world, and he's definitely giving it the beans here at Monza.
Aggressive that Mercedes looks as well. Sachin Sobers 10th in the LMGT3 Pro Championship at the moment. 62 points on the board. So a victory for him could pull him closer to that championship fight. Bit of oversteer through Ascari, but it's purple in the middle sector as well. This could be an even further improvement on a lap that is already off a second ahead of everyone else.
That is one heck of a wash through the Variante Ascari. How he picked it up, I'll never know, but Sachin Sobers is trying to bring it back together. I think he may actually have ended up having to bail out of the lap. I wonder if he realised there, coming through the Variante Ascari, having kicked it up, that he had lost time. He knew that he wasn't going to get a quicker lap, so he bailed on it. Meanwhile, back up to second now comes Becky Ely in the Acura. She has worked her way forward into second position now. So back she comes, just a quarter of a second back from Sachin Sobers. And because Sachin missed his lap, there's an opportunity for everybody else to try and duck in and go for that particular time before Sachin Sobers can warm up the tyres and brakes again to have another go at it. So Sachin Sobers was definitely on a quicker lap, wasn't he?
I don't think there is a go for Sachin anymore. Clock is about to hit the 10-minute mark, which means that any GT car coming across the line is not allowed to put in another lap. You can finish the lap that you're on once it hits 10 minutes, but you can't start a new lap, neither can you exit pit lane. So pit exit closed now for the GT3s. Open for the Hypercars though, so now the big boards are coming out.
Well, Sachin Sobers' time has disappeared from my timing screen, so I wonder if he's actually had to exit the server. That could be quite dramatic before the race even begins. If that's the case, then Becky Ely has suddenly inherited a pole position here from Jamie Sadecki and Brendan Warner. But she's going strong. Purple in Sector 1 and Sector 2, so this is going to be a much quicker time, hopefully, for the Acura. So much smoother through the Variante Ascari as they come down the back straight now. And she's got a little bit of a tow from the Acura in front of her, which is going to help a little bit. It's not going to be massive, but certainly psychologically, it's going to help her down into the braking zone as she turns in. She was a little bit tight on the entry, I noticed there. Could have been a little bit wider in terms of radius. However, she is coming through to finish the job out of the final turn and across the line, and this is going to be a much quicker lap. It's so close. It's actually only 0.06 of a second slower than it was.
Well, she would have needed, if she wanted to be in front of Sachin Sobers, on merit, a 47.250. Didn't get that, but didn't need it in the end for unknown reasons, really. He's dropped from the timing screens, and if I look, he's not even on the timing screens anymore. So I think he might have had some hardware issues. We don't know. It's unknown the reason, but he is not in the session anymore, which is big, of course, for him. That could have been a turning point. This late on into the season, a win for him at this race would have put him right up there, maybe, would have put him up into the top 6, I think, after this race. Of course, a 60-minute race, so it would have been a long shot anyways for him. But he was there in qualifying. Meanwhile, with Daniel Kirby on board going into turn 1, you can see how tricky these cars are under braking.
Bring the thunder, bring the noise. It's time for the Hypercars to get out onto the circuit and really get some speed put down. You're going to see a massive difference in lap times now as the Peugeots, the Acuras and the BMWs are coming out to play with a handful of Cadillacs, a Toyota, one of the Ferraris out there as well, a couple of the Ferraris. So there's definitely going to be some exciting battles to come as Dan Kirby shows us what the Peugeot 9X8 was built for. I'd love to get some on board with the pure noise of this fabulous race car. Here we go. Let's ride all the way to the Variante Ascari and down to the Curva Alboreto on board. Let's have a listen. As Paul Newman once said, music, sweet music. He was talking about a racing car at the time. He was accurate. This is absolutely spot on the money. Dan Kirby's going to come through and post a benchmark, and it's a 1:33.487. Beat that, guys. Fabulous opening gambit there for Dan Kirby. It's a full 14 seconds quicker than the GTs, and Gilles Lalonde's first banker is 2.6 seconds off that. Here comes Ross Smith, putting himself out there in the Curva Alboreto. Off the final turn, Bradley Sellers in second now from Brian Hall, John Uyan and George Angelidis. It's a nice little banker for several of the drivers as they come through. Ross Smith goes fourth and then promptly comes back into pits instantly. John Uyan needs to find another 2 seconds if he's even going to be competitive with his teammate Dan Kirby. But certainly a very exciting start to proceedings here at Monza, and Dan Kirby has laid down the gauntlet, but Timon Suvic in the Kowalski Acura has gone just 89 thousandths of a second off that banker, which proves one thing: that lap is definitely beatable. Oh, there's a spinner in the background. Now, who is that that's gone around there behind John Uyan? So Philip Enrique has gone around, we do believe, on his flying lap. So let's have a look at it again, because this is how easy it is to lose it going into the Variante della Roggia. We're going to look at it on board, and we'll see how it all plays out. So we're just going to give the replay machine a chance to catch up with itself there. But certainly for Philippe Enrique having his moment, is this going to be one of those straight out of the pits moments? I think it might be for Philippe Enrique. But it's when you're in the process of warming up the tyres and heating everything up. So Philippe Enrique, who is one of the Acura ARX drivers, and he obviously... Oh, apparently we don't have the replay of that particular incident. This is him coming back out onto the circuit, so a slight glitch there. We apologise, but Philippe Enrique will now be able to get himself back up to speed, at least. His banker was about 3.6 seconds off the pace. That is how you negotiate that corner, Felipe. Well done. So Philippe Enrique has managed to get it done properly. Now, Guillermo Benschke has set a personal banker, 4.4 seconds off the pace, and Jason Whitehead has brought the Storm Rider Ferrari out onto the circuit again as well. So we could be seeing some times tumbling now as Timon Suvic goes top in the Kowalski Acura. So there we go. Now we've got a fight on our hands for pole position, Dan. It is time to see if Dan Kirby can retain it.
It's going to be difficult. The gap at the moment, like you said, 84 thousandths of a second gap to Timon Suvic has just gone faster, I think, into pole. Dan Kirby is now going to be 84 thousandths behind that. We're going to go to a little bit, here we go, back to live pictures. Here's Timon Suvic. And once again, going quicker in Sector 1. Sector 1, though, such a short sector that, well, Sector 1 is a corner, a chicane, and 2 straights, basically. So Sector 1, not the longest sectors, but definitely one where you can make up some difference in the chicane. Mostly through the 2 Lesmos goes Timon Suvic now. 1:33.403 was his previous lap time. That got him up there, and he's looking to improve even further and, well, stabilize that lead for himself. 84 thousandths of a second once again is the gap he has to Daniel Kirby. The gap to Alexander Schultz behind that, about 6.5 tenths from Daniel Kirby. So they've got a bit of room to play with. I think in the green room before this, no one, I think, expected Timon Suvic to be up there challenging Daniel Kirby. We don't know what that Acura is going to do over race pace-wise, but we have seen that the Acura has been better on tyres than, well, the Peugeot from Daniel Kirby has been. So technically, as he aborts that lap, goes back into pit lane, for unknown reasons, really. Don't know why he didn't go again. Daniel Kirby is on an improvement, though, so that pole position might not stand for long. But looking at the race, though, Jake, I would say that the Acura might have the edge in terms of tyres.
Well, we're running short on opportunities and running short on lap times. Dan Kirby Purple in Sector 1 and Sector 2. A lot of curb taken at the Variante Ascari. That's borderline what you can get away with. Really pushing it now, Dan Kirby. He wants to get this pole position back again. And it's going to be quite tricky to see if he can hold on to this, but he's got a decent car underneath him to be able to go all the way through. And the time has come up across the line. So Dan Kirby has gone top in front of Alexander Schultz now in the Acura. 9/10 of a second, his deficit. So there we are. Dan Kirby, I actually think wasn't sure if that picture was quite live at that point, but certainly we have a new pole sitter. It's Dan Kirby, and there is the man in second. That is Alexander Schultz in second position, 9/10 of a second back from the CMS Pro Peugeot. And then Magnus Dahlgren in the ME Ferrari is in third position. Once again, 3 different manufacturers in the top 3 positions for the time being, but we are running out of time for that to change.
It's a massive lap, though, by Daniel Kirby. That 1:33.238 is almost a full second quicker than Alexander Schultz behind him. I think we were talking a bit, seconds before that he was going to be challenged. I don't know indeed where has... Oh, we've lost someone again, I think. Haven't we? Because Schultz is now second. And Schultz wasn't second before. I think it was third. Magnus Dahlgren is now third. Ross Smith fourth. John Ewan, teammate from Daniel Kirby, is in P5. Tom Lane 6. Brian Holt 7. Bradley Sellers in 8. Walter De Bruyne in 9th. And Philip Enrique in 10th.
I think Schultz has just gone quicker. I'm still waiting for a big lap from Guillermo Benschke, who's gone about 4 seconds off the pace. Gilles Lalonde has really struggled to get his pace up there as well. And I noticed that Walter De Bruyne is conspicuous by his absence. Way down in 10th position in the Rookie Monster BMW. He comes through now, goes 9th, but that's still 1.6 seconds away. Really struggling for top-end pace, these BMWs. It's Peugeot all the way, but that's what I love about this championship, the ebb and flow through the season. One circuit, one particular car is the best to have. Another circuit, another car is the best to have. So it works out as to which is the best over an entire season that gets the job done. Bradley Sellers, though, is making a good run of the BMW hybrids and has got that up into third position. So Bradley Sellers has put his Nookie Monster BMW into third position. So very nicely done there as he misses the chicane. Very nearly dodges everything as Timon Suvic now comes back into second position in his Acura to go 1/10 of a second off the pace of Dan Kirby. And there is Oliver Newman, currently running 11th in his BMW, but has had a pretty shocking first sector if he wants to get up there, so he's not going to make the top 10 with the time that we've got remaining. I think pretty much everybody is now on their final effort, but it's Kirby from Suvic, Schultz, Sellers, Dahlgren, Ross Smith, John Uyan, Tom Lane, Brian Hall, and Wouter De Bruyne. And the gap between them all is 1.6 seconds, so it's tight, but there's definite room for improvement.
Timon Suvic in second. All of a sudden popped up there for me again on my timing screen. Don't know if that's a timing screen glitch, but yeah, he's up there in second once again. Daniel Kirby still in first. So he's still the man to beat, and I think he's improving in Sector 1 and 2 again. Oliver Newman in 13 isn't improving Sector 1 and 2 and is going back into pit lane. This is the last chance though. Daniel Kirby, purple Sector 1, yellow Sector 2, is not improving there. What does he do in the last sector? Can he improve? Yes, he does. Goes to a 133, 165, and strengthens his lead at the top of the timing table on the left-hand side. And the gap is now almost 2.5 of a second. Can Timon Suvic react to that?
I'm not entirely sure he's going to have the time to go for that. So I think Dan Kirby has stamped his authority on this qualifying session. Indeed, Suvic has already parked it. In fact, Dan Kirby was the last one across the line. So there you go, the last lap of the session. And it's the pole position time for the CMS Pro Peugeot that has already taken 4 wins so far in 2023. And that is absolutely what Dan Kirby was hoping for here at Monza. So we can run you down the provisional rankings after qualifying. Dan Kirby in the CMS Pro Peugeot, topping the timesheets after a fabulous run there in qualifying right at the bitter end. he comes up with the goods to go 0.238 of a second faster than Timon Suvic. So here is the grid. Dan Kirby and Timon Suvic will be on the front row from Alexander Schultz in his Acura and Bradley Sellers in the Rookie Monsters BMW Hybrid. Fifth place will be Magnus Dahlgren in the ME Racing Ferrari, and then Ross Smith in the Acura. Wouter de Bruin improved right at the end there to go 7th in the Rookie Monsters BMW. He needed to as well, because John Uyan in the CMS Pro Peugeot will be right there with him. Then Tom Lane and Brian Hall, Manta Squid Porsche and Hall Brothers Acura. Then Louis Hesketh in the first of the Pro-Am cars. Hayden Calnan in the Oldenstow Ferrari will be next up. Then it is Oliver Newman and Philip Henrique. They'll be together on the 7th row of the grid. Then George Angelidis and Jerry Chen, 2 drivers we don't expect to see that far down the ranks. Definitely struggling a little bit today. Then Sebastian Exposito and Tony McCoffervan. And then we have Norm Graff in the Bad Day Cadillac. It certainly was for the Bad Day squad in their Peugeot. Gilles Lalonde has struggled there as well in 20th place. Then Guillermo Benchka and Jason Whitehead in their Stuart Haas Cadillac and Storm Rider Ferraris respectfully. And then Benjamin Portishead in the Toyota. Then we get Sachin Sobers, the first of the GT cars, in front of Becky Ely and Jamie Zaleczki in the Stardust Acura. Brendan Warner in the Mercedes AMG and Josh DePetri in the McLaren 720S. Then we've got Peter Mayer in the Mercedes and Stuart Barge in the HBD Acura. JT Tammy in the Aston Martin Vantage alongside Vinicius Gonçalves in the Audi R8. Then on the 17th row of the grid, it'll be John Mayer in the Acura alongside the Pazuzu Ferrari of Eugene Mazur. And then the McLaren of James Walker will be alongside the Porsche of Alain Lefrançois, who'll be 36th on the grid. Then we'll have Gilles Villeneuve in the Lexus, Adam Gray in the Reptile BMW, Stephen Miller in the Speed Details McLaren, Brandon Gant in the Nissan Nismo GT3 in 40th position on the grid. So we're not entirely sure if Brandon Gant is going to be in the race because we didn't see much from him in terms of the timesheets, but definitely a very exciting battle there in qualifying, and fresh from the cockpit to give us some tidbits of insider information, as he always seems to do in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. It's Ross Smith. He's made his way into the booth once again. Hello, Ross. Tell me, a bit hot out there, is it?
Good evening, Jake. Yes, it's toasty, and the tires are feeling it. I'm sure you saw lots of snaking going around on the track.
So based on what we've seen now essentially in the practice and then into the qualifying session, we were talking a little bit at the top of the bill about the race strategies. What do you think we can expect to see? I mean, certainly you guys, the Noon Racing Acura, you want to keep things close to your chest, but what do you predict we're going to see from the Peugeot boys at CMS Pro, from the ME Racing Ferrari? What sort of tactics do you think are going to be played coming into this one?
Tire management's going to be a huge one, just because of how hot it is, and certainly for the all-wheel drive cars, they have a lot more deg to deal with, particularly on the front, so you're going to see them pushing a lot more, and they've gotten their setups probably as loose as they possibly can to account for that. But yeah, it definitely makes for some interesting racing. If it does start to sprinkle a little bit later on, which may or may not, who knows, probably won't, but if it does, it certainly spice things up a little and make for some great racing.
Now, the very fact that you've brought that up means that it's in the back of your mind, and of course it's going to be in the back of everybody's minds here. Knowing that you have only got a wet tyre, not an intermediate tyre, means that changing to the wet tyre, if it does start raining, is going to be critical. At what point, essentially, does it become critical to change to wet tyres? Because it's obviously going to be a mixed condition circuit when you have to make that decision. I mean, is it to do with traction coming out of corners, or is it to do with lap times that you have to make that decision? When do you make that call?
Yeah, kind of by feel, especially if you're not sure how much things are going to be kind of getting wetter or not, and yeah, so it's and it's by car. I mean, you just have to see, like, you know, when is the point when you say enough is enough, and the drivers, especially coming from Thursday where it was a very wet race, they know how quickly the track can dry out. So if you make the wrong choice and you come in for wet tires instead of trying to stick it out, it could bite you badly, or it could make you a hero. I mean, it's a luck of the draw once the rain starts to fall.
Well, we've got the Restream chat open, and Kerbizzle, who we can only assume is the pole position sitter himself, has said, gosh, that was a difficult quali. Those Acuras are so strong here. Reaction to that? Obviously, Ross, that's going to be something that you guys will probably need to look out for.
We are, but we're not walking away from anyone by any means. I mean, the way that the Storm Gang crew has set everything up here, the cars are strong and weak in different places, and it's just knowing how to press your advantage. That's going to determine who ends up coming away with a win or a better position. And certainly any other conditions in the race, traffic, how you manage strategy around all of those conditions. I mean, that's why we're all here. It's what makes endurance racing so great, sports car racing so great. So yeah, we're gonna see how it goes. And speaking of the cars themselves, I mean, we've got a lot of updates happening with them. Not as much from last week when we were kind of talking about it, as there just hasn't been enough time. We've been kind of working with some of the development tools, but looking forward to next year, we definitely have quite a bit in the works. We've been talking with modelers on getting some new cars in here. Many of them are, as you'd expect, seeing some of the new cars out in the world today. We're going to have them here, so lots to look forward to. A few will be retiring too. We're going to say goodbye to the Bentley. The Audi is probably on the chopping block too, but there will be plenty to fill in those spots, and it's going to make it pretty exciting to be a hypercar. But it's going to be really fun to be a GT2. There are probably about, I could say right now confidently, there are 3 new cars in each class that we're going to see.
I love talking like the nerdy side of the mods, what cars are going to be added, what are going to be taken away. This is absolutely my sort of, this is my bread and butter. I love all of this kind of stuff. Terry Pratchett used to say things like this were like pornography for the brain. And this is absolutely like, when we get excited about what cars are going to be there and what cars are not. And it's as close to the real world of motor racing as obviously possible to try and make it adaptable. But when making those critical decisions, is it more than just looking at what's going on in the real world situation with the GT3 cars? Was there a sort of a demand for a particular car to come in and a particular car to be taken away, or is it all just sort of following the natural progression of the GT3 world?
It's a bit of both, for sure. I mean, you'd love to have choice as much as possible, and certainly those cars we talked about are homologated through next year, so they theoretically, if a team picks it up, they can go. But for the sake of the mod, we want to clear out a little bit of space, make it a little bit easier to keep things in BOP, and certainly offer drivers choices, because there has been demand. I mean, there are drivers that are asking for the new Ford Mustang. I mean, the Mark II version that we have here that we kind of pulled from international waters has served us well, but now there's an official boy in town, so yeah, we want to chase that. And of course, there are others, certainly mixing with the studio content. Their tires versus our tires gets interesting, and some drivers, depending on what side of the grid they're on by the end of the race, might have more gripes than others. But it's one of those things we want to try and eliminate as much, disparity between them as possible. So there are a couple cars that are going to get updated that are currently in the studio pack, and we're going to bring into our pack and just take control ourselves, so that way we can make everything as enjoyable as possible and consistent.
So that's really exciting. I have to say, it's always sad when you lose a brand, and being a British motor racing enthusiast, to hear that the Bentley's going to disappear is rather sad. We are live on air. This is being recorded. I'm going to put my neck out on the line here. The last round of the championship is at Bahrain in November. If I'm suitably near a rig and I can get some testing time done in, I'm going to give the Bentley a proper British send-off. I will enter the last race. How does that for a bit of a bombshell to say goodbye to the Bentley? I'll do my best.
Wow, it'd be incredible if you could. Yeah, for sure.
Was that a big enough bombshell for everybody before the race got underway?
Certainly surprising. We've had some good drivers in the Bentley. Some of them have certainly given it a good run.
And this one isn't going to be. And that's what you were going to say next.
I don't want to. No, I'm sure you do. You do.
If I don't make qualifying, if I don't make a good pace, I'll get out of everybody's way. But it would be nice to send it off in style. We'll see what we can do. But no, let's get back to a serious conversation. I'll pin it. I'll put a pin in it for next time. Coming into this race, you're obviously going to be in the Acura battling away. The Peugeot we know it's going to be a very comparable rival to you guys. And obviously, this particular circuit is kind of where the lack of rear wing and that massive generation of downforce really comes into its own. Is this kind of a race where you feel that you can sort of get under the kinks of the Peugeot a little bit and expose some of its weaknesses, or are you literally just waiting to see how the opening couple of stints unfold and then you know where you are?
Yeah, we definitely feel a little bit stronger than the competition versus some of the past races we've been in, but it's still point and shoot corners. So I mean, that serves the Peugeot pretty well in terms of if they can get the back end around and point it forward. Yeah, they're really tough to catch. So I mean, it's still going to be a tough battle. Obviously, Daniel's way up the order. I mean, he's got a big long line of Acuras behind him. You got a couple BMWs up there. Obviously, those guys from over I can't remember what team they're on, but Sellers and Dahlgren, obviously they're doing a good job. They know how to tune a car, so BMW's doing them well. Which that one will also be getting an update too right now. Brian, who's done a lot of the interiors like the Acura and whatnot, and he's worked on some other cars. He is doing the interior for the BMW right now, so that one should be beautiful once he's got that one released. And then, of course, once we're done with the Hypercars, then we're going to jump right over to the GTs and get those all tuned up. We're going to replace the Glickenhaus and the Toyota with the updated versions of those, so that way they look spiffy and everything. And you know, the Glickenhaus, there's question marks around whether it'll be around next year. I'd like to keep it in the pack, especially if I'm going to put all that time and effort into making the model nice. You know, I'd like to see it come back. And you know, you don't have too many American brands. It's like Cadillac. At the top end, which obviously it's a big one, and you know, opinions around Glickenhaus being what they are, it's nice to see as many brands as you said that can be represented, and you know, he's got an affinity for Ferrari's past. Ferrari obviously showed up with the future, and that's good. Which, speaking of the past, sorry to keep going on, but we also are working on the historic mod as well, which. Yes. It's going to be very delightful. We're going a little further back in time than the 98s that we're running now. I won't say exactly when, but there have been certain movies made around this time period. So,
oh my goodness!
We believe that the car choice is going to be incredible. Right now we have 9 cars between basically 2 classes. And as I mentioned before, the amount and types of courses we'll be going on, you're going to have rally stages. You're going to have big road courses that are out in the countryside. You're going to have street circuits and purpose-built circuits and everything. It's got everything. So it's going to be a wonderful time.
Oh dear me, I think I may have just cancelled all my plans for 2024. Yeah, I think I may just lose myself into the world of sim racing as a competitor. That's sounding incredibly exciting. And that's what I've loved over the last couple of seasons anyway. You know, last year we did Group C. This year we're doing my favourite era of my childhood for Le Mans, 1998, which was just such a fabulous period for sports car racing in general. And now to hear that you're going even further back to give us a dose of proper motor racing excitement. This is the kind of thing I live for as well. I'm a motor racing historian, and you know, my favorite motor racing stories go all the way back to the 1920s, never mind, you know, the 1970s. So the fact that we're going to get the opportunity as a community to play with those sort of toys, very, very exciting. Just how much work goes into putting that kind of concept together, putting those sort of ideas into the head of everybody, and then collaborating. This must take months, never mind weeks.
We've started working on this in earnest now since last month, and even before that we were spending quite a bit of time just coordinating, trying to find where assets exist and talk with modders and groups out there that have already developed them in some form or another, particularly like on the Assetto Corsa side, and just finding those in the community to help, you know, share the burden, share the credit, and do what we can to make sure that these cars exist in a format in a way that we can do them justice, and we can really bring it back. Like when we did the 71s, I mean, I can't get the vision out of my head, like when you're running through the night at Le Mans and it's completely pitch dark around you, but off in the distance you can see that front stretch with the lights beamed up and the stands and everything, and that's the only thing you're racing towards, and I honestly like had feelings like, man, is a sheep or a random cow just gonna just be in the middle of the road at some point? I mean, it felt so good and so real, like, and you're just thinking, man, these guys did this for real, just 300 kilometers an hour, just flying around, and like nothing between them and certain death. And so it's so cool to just kind of put yourself in those shoes again and read the history, like learn about these cars, the drivers, the stories that go with them, just like you're saying. I mean, this is stuff to get excited about, and then jump in and then replay it, like, just hit rewind on history and go back.
I just adore all this. This is absolutely my, the kind of quality that I look for in a sim is, when there is devotion and dedication to it. And I've always felt there is no other sport with the sort of love for nostalgia and the depth and the extraordinary collaboration and exploration of nostalgia, quite like the world of motorsport with all its various different degrees of cars. It's the only form of sport, and I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it again, even on a virtual stream, because it's true here as much as it is in the real world. No other form of sport gives you the same amount of diversity, the variability from one year to the next in terms of regulations and rules, and certainly here in the world of esports, more sort of exciting and diverse toys and machines to play with, and different concepts, different rule changes. It's the toughest, roughest, meanest, leanest form of sport on the planet, and even in the esports world, it is so exciting. And that's why I'm here, that's why you're here, that's why we're all here. So it's going to be very exciting to see what 2024 has to bring. When can we see the first sort of concept images? When can we first see the first sort of appearances on a virtual track of what we're going to get to see in 2024? What's the timeline like?
So we're targeting calendar end of year, probably December is when we're going to be doing public test races. So that way people can get their hands on it, give some feedback, refine the cars a little bit, and everything that's going on with the series. And then January, it all kicks off.
Very exciting. So people are only going to get about 3 to 4 weeks of playing and teething troubles before they actually go racing for the first time. Very exciting. Ross, thank you very much. We've kept you for quite a long time. You've got a couple of minutes more of the warm-up session to get ready to get behind the wheel, and we wish you all the best and Godspeed for Monza. Have a good one.
Thank you, and good luck to you guys. Thank you to JPP and Jake Sanson. You guys are doing a wonderful job. Really appreciate it. I mean, you really make this bring the pedigree to life when it comes to like the sights and sounds that are going on here. So we appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you so much.
Very kind of you. Thank you. Well, when the sport is this accurate and when it's this up close, it's very hard not to get excited about it. And as we finish off the practice session, we'll let Ross get himself ready to go in the cockpit. It's going to be a fabulous race. Dan, the excitement factor that's just beating through my veins now at the prospect that we're going even further back in time from 1998 for next year's mods. I'm already starting to make guesses as to what it's going to be. Are we going to be in Le Mans 66 era? Are we going to be in the Steve McQueen era? What are we going to have? It's going to be amazing.
I can't wait, just like you. There's a certain point, 10,000 RPM. A very famous sentence, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very excited indeed. Well, the only way to find out how it's going to play out in 2024 is right here. Stick with us, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well, and every time there's a live stream, you'll be able to go racing. You can head to the website as well, cmsracing.com, and join the community. Get yourself on the grid if you're not already, and you'll be very, very welcome in. That's one of the things I've absolutely adored about this community. I've been to the top of the pinnacle and the glitz and glamour of esports racing, and I've been right into the beginners lobbies. And it's very hard to find a community where you feel that the accuracy of the motorsport and the spirit of the competition overweighs the sort of the egotism, the nepotism, and sometimes even the slight chastisement of the sport to a certain degree. I find the sort of toxicity of keyboard warriors very off-putting, and one of the things I have always loved about CMS is that none of the things I dislike ever seem to creep in And it's always about the community spirit, the great racing, the beautiful aesthetics of the cars and the circuits, the glory of the competition, and the absolute adoration of the best sport in the world. That's what you're going to find when you come to play at Champion Motorsports. Whether you're a spectator or a competitor or even a broadcaster, you're always going to find something to adore. So we are getting to the end of the warm-up session. The checkered flag has come out, and as you have been able to see while we were chatting there with Ross and while we were chatting with Dan, drivers pushing the limits, still trying to find that little bit of extra pace, that little bit of extra speed to take into the race. Just that little bit of added confidence of what you can and can't do in some of these faster apexes, Dan. Some drivers will only really nail that in the last 5 minutes of practice sometimes before they know exactly, with full confidence on hot tyres, what this car is going to give them back.
Now, something that we do have to mention, Jake, is the fact that we've got a orange zone, as always. A zone where you can overtake, but if you do have an incident, you will get punished 2, 3, maybe 4 times as hard as you normally would. So that zone runs from start-finish through the first chicane, the Rettifilio, then through Curva Grande, and then through the Della Roggia. Then the last 2 corners are both Lesmos. So Lesmos 1 and 2. And then on the exit of turn 5, Lesmo 2 into Seraglio is where that orange zone ends and where you can overtake and hopefully still not have contact. But if you do, the penalty will be just as per normal instead of twice, maybe 3 times as hard as usual. So that's where the orange zone is for this race. From start-finish all the way to the exit of Lesmo number 2. Very crucial for the start.
It is indeed, but also it's great to see that this kind of thing, again, becomes part of the sport. You know, I actually really favour the orange zone in esports racing, particularly when you go through all of these various communities where, you know, certain drivers will make a bit of a rough go of it in the start, and then obviously the race has essentially been already lost for another couple of competitors. What the orange zone does essentially is it neutralizes that ethos. It doesn't completely take away incidents, but it certainly gets rid of the anticipation of that sort of incident. A bit like in the world of karting, where I earn a lot of my bread and butter, where we had to change the front fairing so that basically if the front fairing came loose off the bracket, you would get a 5-second penalty now. Which obviously is designed to stop drivers just ramming each other off the road. And it hasn't fixed every problem, but it's certainly got rid of one of the biggest issues in the karting world, which was loading, which would take 3 or 4 drivers out of the race on the first lap pretty much every time. So it's great to see that that sort of innovation and that sort of concept is still rife within the esports community, particularly here where, you know, the ethos is always about the spirit of competition rather than the antagonism of the spirit of racing.
Yeah, and also, of course, we start single file, and it's not the leader that decides when we start. It's when the leader crosses the start-finish line. That's when we go green. So, yeah, there are multiple ways that VWSC has kind of made sure that there's no T1 Monza incidents all the time. And I favor it, because what that does is it kind of makes sure that all of the drivers who are racing and who are in it for the endurance race actually get to drive, instead of, well, one driver taking a bit too much risk and taking out half of the field down in turn 1. So I favor what they've done, and I'm a big fan of it.
Me too. It definitely makes the racing a little bit more cleaner and a little bit more pure. So anything that does that, all hail to it as a concept. David Junt can hear the Sansonator. I am absolutely trademarking that nickname and running to the bank with it. Thanks, mate. We'll definitely coin that one. So the drivers set off on the formation lap, and we gear ourselves up ready for the start of a fabulous encounter here at Monza, and it's definitely going to be an exciting one right from the outset. Dan Kirby on the front row of the starting grid from pole position, hoping to confirm that and convert it into a fifth race victory. Here's the grid in full. Dan Kirby alongside Timon Suvik on the front row of the grid, Alexander Schultz and Bradley Sellers on the second row. Then it's Magnus Dahlgren in fifth position on the grid on the third row alongside Ross Smith in the Noon Racing Acura. And then it is Walter de Bruyn in the Rookie Monster BMW Hybrid alongside John Uyan in the second of the CMS Pro Peugeots. Then it's Tom Lane in the Manta Squid Porsche. Brian Hall in the Hall Brothers Acura is 10th. Then Louis Hesketh in his BMW Hybrid. Hayden Kalnan in the Ferrari comes 12th. Oliver Newman in the BMW Hybrid is in 13th position. Alongside him, Philip Henrique in his Acura. Then George Angelidis down in 15th on the grid alongside another disappointment, Jerry Chen in the Dogs and a Kiwi Porsche. He would rather have hoped for more than that. Then Sebastian Exposito is in 17th alongside Tony McCofferman. And then we have Norman Graff in 19th place in the Cadillac alongside the Peugeot of Gilles Lalonde. 21st for Guillaume Benchka in his Cadillac. And then 22nd for the Storm Rider Ferrari of Jason Whitehead. 23rd for Benjamin Portersheath. And then the first of the GTs, Sachin Sobers, pole position in his Mercedes. Becky Ely and Jamie Zalechki in their Acuras come next. Then it is Brendan Warner in the Mercedes in 27th and Josh Lepetri in the McLaren in 28th place. Then it is Peter Mayer in his AMG, Stuart Barge in the HPD Acura, JT Tammy in the Champion Racing Aston Martin, and then Vinicius Gonçalves in the R8, one of its final appearances in the mod potentially. Then John Mayer in his Acura, Eugene Mazur in the Pazuzu Ferrari, James Walker will be sharing the 18th row of the starting grid in his McLaren alongside the Porsche of Alain Lafrancois. Then Gilles Villeneuve in his Lexus, Adam Gray in his Reptile BMW, and then at the back of the grid, Stephen Miller and the absent Brandon Gant, who entered but does not appear to be out on circuit. So a slight problem there, I'm afraid, for Brandon Gant, who is not going to be taking any further part in the race. Very unfortunate. So we're getting ourselves ready for the start, and I notice that there is no Dan Kirby. The CMS Pro Peugeot has disappeared from pole position just before the race is about to get underway.
Now, is this maybe some hardware issue, a lost connection? This is going to be big for the championship as well, because I can't see him in this session anywhere. Now, I do know that Timon Suvik had a bit of trouble earlier on as well, did manage to rejoin, but in the race, you're going to lose some crucial lap times with that.
Oh my goodness. Well, this race has suddenly had a curveball thrown at it, and Timon Suvik now becomes the pole sitter who will start the race from the front of the grid. This is absolute heartbreak for Dan Kirby. Pole position, yes, but it's all disappeared, and we are coming to the line to go green at Monza. We are underway for the 60 minutes in the Virtual World Sports Car Championship. Timon Suvik leading away from Alexander Schultz. Brad Sellers, a decent start in the BMW. Looks like the Ferrari is already going to try and make its attentions count. Hayden Kalnan going wheel to wheel with Louis Hesketh as the AM competitors just dipping their toe down to the braking zone. A couple of drivers going wheel to wheel, trying to stay out of harm's way. Looks good for the moment, but certainly out in front of Timon Suvik, Schultz and Sellers. It is catastrophic bad luck for Dan Kirby, but it certainly opens things out for the championship fight. Here come the GTs, and there is your man up at the front end, Sachin Sobers, hoping to get a decent move away with Becky Ely already starting to put pressure on him down to the first chicane. So is Becky Ely going to go for broke down into the first chicane? Well, she's certainly having a think about it, isn't she? She's not quite getting on the inside of Sachin Sobers, but certainly reminding Sachin that he cannot be lackluster on this first lap, as Becky Ely is hungry to get into the lead.
Becky Ely, of course, needs those points in the championship as well. Wants to catch up to the top 5 and wants to strengthen her position in the championship as well. Sachin Sobers doing well to keep her behind, and that Mercedes has got a bit of a break already. It seems like that Mercedes is quick. In the background we saw one of the Acuras going off track as well. Seems to be Zalecki, but a good start, I would say, for everyone so far in that orange zone doing its job.
So a clean start. Timon Suvik is your leader in the Kowalski Acura, and look at the gap he's already started to pull out. Dan Kirby must be absolutely sick to his stomach watching this on the sidelines. Here comes Brad Sellers in the BMW Hybrid. He may even have a look into the Rettifilio. He had a little bit of a think about it and then decided better against it. But if he can get a decent run out of the Rettifilio, he may get a chance up to the Della Roggia. Let's ride on board. Up through the gears. Through the Curva Grande. close to the curb, but not quite hitting it. Then you come under the bridge, up to the braking zone for the Della Roggia. Brake. Don't plant it too much on the throttle, just blend it on the way through. A little bit of soaring at the wheel needed for Bradley Sellers to get it crossed up. Then into Lesmo 1. Guide the car in. Oh, a lot of wrestling with the wheel for Brad Sellers. Those tyres not up to temperature yet. Then into the second Lesmo. Dive in. Almost 90-degree turn. And then up along the Seraglio and under the banking, which was used for the Monza Annapolis back in the 1950s, diving into the Variante Ascari, turn in, left, right, still hugging these apexes, but look at the way the car washes out.
Wow, that is incredible, the way he kept that going in the right direction. The gap, though, in the first sector came down from Alexander Schulz to Timon Suvik, but after that, it is Timon Suvik who's been pulling out 6-7 tenths of a second in the second sector through sector 3. More of the same, I guess. 31.115 from Timon Suvik, 31.527 through the last sector for Alexander Schulz. So already in these early stages, it is Timon Suvik who's pulling out a whopping 1.2 seconds a lap. Further back, this is Wouter de Bruyn trying to go for the overtake on the Porsche. This is not going to work. Two drivers side by side through that corner is already tricky enough on your own, and he does not get through.
So Tom Lane is really putting the stops on in his Manta Squid Porsche, but here comes Wouter de Bruyn to try again down into the Variante della Roggia. Surely he'll get that stop. No, he doesn't. And a very committed braking patch there for Tom Lane to hold the car round the outside. He is not going to give Wouter de Bruyn any free meals today. He's really going to have to find another way to break into the fridge. Now, Magnus Dahlgren and Ross Smith up in front, leading the cavalry to try and get back onto things. There is Magnus Dahlgren in the leading Ferrari, but John Uyan has got his Peugeot up to speed, the sole remaining CMS Pro Peugeot. I can't believe we're saying that this early into the race, and he's all over the back of Ross Smith. So there's not a lot Dan Kirby can do except just sit and accept his fate. A race win has completely disappeared before he's even had a chance to prove he was good enough for it. Sellers still hungry for Schultz, but John Uyan is going to try and make his bid here on Ross Smith, round the outside into the Parabolica. Full commitment from the Peugeot, and he manages to hold it, but he drops in round the outside. He's got to come back in behind the rear wing. So John Uyan will go for Ross Smith into turn 1.
Now, that Peugeot quick in a straight line. But how quick is it? Is it quick enough to go for a move even? Because he's quite far back. He's going to look for it. Pulls to the inside. Brakes late. And gets it done. The two are still side by side on the exit though of the Rettifilio. But John Ewan gets it done. Moves up into P5. And Ross Smith back down into P6. Now as Brian Hall and Tom Lane on the back of him.
As beautiful as the Sistine Chapel, that move. Absolutely terrific from John Uyan. That was absolutely textbook. And now that Ross Smith has been defeated by John Uyan, Brian Hall is sensing the opportunity. Well, if he can do that, I've got an even better move up my sleeve. So into the first Lesmo. And watch out, mate. You've got Tom Lane on your 6 as well. The Manta Squid Porsche is all over the back of him. Into the second Lesmo. Back on the power again. Let's ride on board with Tom Lane. Now, this is going to be a real indication of the slipstream effect. You've got 2 cars in the draft here of Ross Smith. That's Brian Hall up in front. We're on board with Tom Lane. Down into the braking zone. You can see how tricky it gets into the Ascari. Look, that's the wash of the slipstream. It really unsettles the car, and Tom Lane's going to get a much better exit here than Brian Hall. But look, he decides to slot in behind him. This is taking 2 steps back to go 3 steps forward later in the lap. Because look, he's going to try and now pull out round the outside. I think he should have waited one more corner, you know, because he's going to drift out wide here, and Brian Hall's going to have him. He could have waited one more corner for my money.
What he's done there, though, is I think has set Brian Hall up for not the best exit, and he himself, of course, with that wider exit out of the corner, was able to carry more speed through. Is he now going to be able to go for a move down in the turn 1? Traffic coming into play as well. The McLaren. Oh! There's contact between the two. And Tom Lane has got to wait. There's even further contact on the exit. If Brian Hall doesn't get going, had a bit of wheel spin coming off the corner. And that has allowed Wouter de Bruyn to come right back onto the tail of Tom Lane.
See, how big a risk do you want to take with traffic as well? It looks as though Louis Hesketh in his BMW has retired from the race in the opening sequence, so that's very unfortunate for him. So Tom Lane, I do believe, going to see a replay of
John Ewan spinning, I think.
John Uyan spinning in the Peugeot, I do believe. Let's have a look. Out of the first Lesmo into the second Lesmo. Is this where he's going to drop it down?
No, it's going to be the next one, Ascari. I think, oh, traffic. Leaving it very late to pull out, though. I never like to do that, because you don't know where you're going to go, and sometimes the GT panics. Watch the BMW up ahead as well. A bit of contact maybe between the two. No contact. Unsettles the car, though, I think, with that move. It's a question.
There it is.
Oh, no, he's going to keep it going. He's dropped down the order, though, massively. He's in P11 right now. And he's behind Hayden Callan.
So this is his method to come back into contention, actually. So unfortunately, we missed the incident, but John Uyan down into 11th position. It's gone from bad to worse for CMS Pro as going through the traffic, Timon Suvic. Now, there's what happened. So John Uyan has lost it that's the Della Roggia. So here's how it happened. He's got traffic in front. He's done it all on his own, look. So
now
it was the
waiting.
back end just, it was the back end just kicking out, wasn't it, Dan? It just kicked out at the wrong moment.
Yeah, it did. Also, that rejoin was almost picture perfect, and it needed to be, because there was an Acura in the background coming through as well. Couldn't quite make out who that was, but that was too close for comfort, I think, for the Acura. But they did manage to both make it through without contact, but not ideal, that rejoin either.
Well, I'm afraid I didn't see where it happened, but Bradley Sellers has managed to get into second position now, past Alexander Schultz. So that is the BMW now splitting the two Acuras, but this is where your race is won and lost, going through the traffic. This is where it really gets tricky. And at the moment, they are currently lapping Sachin Sobers, I do believe, who is, oh no, it's one of the others, but there is Becky Ely in front, so Sachin Sobers is not far away from that. And obviously you've got Mercedes, Acura, Mercedes up at the front end. So they're just going past Brandon Warner. Now they're going to make their way past Becky Ely. Last second decision from Alexander Schultz to drift his way past Becky Ely. That was a very critical decision made, as we're now looking at John Uyan's recovery. He's got another Peugeot on his tail. Gilles Lalonde is actually tagging behind. Oh, and John Uyan's overshot. John Uyan's gone off.
He's pulled a Charles Leclerc and has gone deep into the last corner. That's going to lose him heaps and heaps of time. Maybe some damage as well to repair for him. Going to see if he's going to pull to the right-hand side of circuit to go into pit lane. But not the ideal start. And now both Peugeots have had a horrendous start to this race.
It's awful for John Uyan. He's no longer in the top 10. He's obviously going to come in for some kind of damage. And Dan Kirby, who was supposed to be starting from pole position, well, he dropped out on the formation lap. Absolute disaster. He is back out on the circuit, I should point out. He's down at the very back of the field, Dan Kirby. But this is essentially now an extended test session for him.
Well, he might pick up some further points that maybe are lost by some of the hypercars dropping it. He's only 2 laps behind the lead is, I think, he's a lap behind Adam Gray in the GT class. So he is still there, only 2 laps behind the hypercar field. That's not a lot here that we're talking about. But in a 60-minute race, yeah, you're never going to make up those 2 laps. So he needs a miracle here if he wants to either get into the top 10 or just gather some valuable points here. Every point you have to think of here is one for it. Traffic. That's the lead.
Sachin Sobers is that a problem. So what has happened to the leader in GT down into the Parabolica? And has he had a problem? Oh, he's gone very wide off the road. And that is absolutely perfect for Becky Ely to take the lead and everybody else to just about avoid him.
Close there with the Acura as well into turn 1. That's Jamie Zalecki behind him. And I don't know who that Mercedes is up ahead of him. It seems to be Brendan Warner. So it seems like something has happened into the last corner. Couldn't really gather what, but it slowed him down. That Porsche's not ideal there on the apex either. That's going to lose him some time. Brendan Warner now has Sasha Sorbers all over the back of him. He's going to retake that lead now. Down into the first of the two Lesmos. Isn't brave enough to make it stick, but forces him wide. This is surely going to be moved on here, Jake.
Well, Sobers is really struggling at this point in second place. Zaleczki is all over him like a bad habit, and Sobers just doesn't seem to have any consistency in the pace of his Mercedes anymore. The Hypercars are going to make mincemeat of him, but here's Zaleczki all over the back of Sachin Sobers, and this is definitely not what they wanted to see. So Zaleczki is piling on the pressure here, but obviously you've got so many difficulties already in the breadth of the field. You've got Becky Ely now in front and a good 4 seconds clear of this trio now as a result of all of this. You've got Sobers, Warner and Jamie Zaleczki in the Acura. For some reason, Zaleczki is still showing up as third in class. Oh, well, no, of course he is third in class because Brendan Warner is not in the same class as the others, but he's fourth in GT. So these three still battling away for position. So in the GT overall category, it is Ely that leads, and then Sobers, Warner and Zaleczki dueling away for second place. They've got to get out of the way of one of the Hypercars coming through, but then the Hypercar obviously slams on the brakes. Don't go into the back of the Hypercar and braking, for goodness sake. Want to make sure that you actually get the car turned in without making contact with a Hypercar. And Jamie Zaleczki, who is looking for a podium in category, but certainly fourth overall in GT, really struggling to stay with the now seemingly recovered Sachin Sobers, who is getting away from Brendan Warner again, but whatever that headache was for Sachin Sobers, it's unclear because it looked as though he just drifted off the road. I wonder if he was having brake problems already.
That would be too early on into the race. These GT cars are made to go a 24-hour distance. Really,
Whoa.
Has a Toyota in the background is off as well. I think that's Heath as well. Yeah, that's Heath in the background. One of the only drivers to drive in the Toyota. So easily, easy to pick out. And that was just a little bit too much into the first Lesmo. Can't this it back up though for the second one. Doesn't make too big of a thing of it. Well, gets underway again, but that was a heart-and-mouth moment for him, I would say.
Just carried way too much speed into the first Lesmo. He was going about 10 to 15 miles an hour faster than he could manage to get the car turned in for. As the Peugeot there, trying not to trip over a Mercedes. God, that was close. Down into the hairpin. Sachin Sobers having to suddenly realise, oh no, wait, that's a Peugeot. I need to give him a little bit more room than that. And as a result, he's on the back foot. And Sachin Sobers is now going to be reeled in here down the straight, surely, by Brendan, who is once again pushing on. So this is going to be Brendan Warner trying to close up. But of course, they've got the Toyota in front of them now. Again, you've got to be very careful on the brakes if you're a GT. But look, he's got a much better line off of the chicane than the Toyota, so he's able to outdrag him, but then he has to let him go again as the horsepower of the Hypercar kicks in. It's a tough little to and fro, a tough little pendulum swinging in terms of the amount of power you can put down initially from the GT, and then the acceleration kicks in for the Hypercar.
Oh, Sachin Sobers, not ideal. The Peugeot once again. A bit too much speed into the corner. Jamie Zaleczki, though, in the background, is not hanging on to the pace from Sachin.
Oh, who's gone off?
Back.
So it's the same corner for the same car. The Toyota's gone off again at Lesmo 1, just carrying far too much speed through the turn.
Now, in the background, like I said, it is Jamie Zaleczki not quite able to cling on to the pace of Sobers, but it's the AM of Brendan Warner, who's, well, pressurizing Sachin Sobers, one of the pro drivers, second in the pro class as well. A stellar drive here from Brendan Warner. And Lepetri is 6.7 seconds behind that. Then it's Barge, well, 8/10 behind Lepetri. So it's the top three really breaking away in that LMGT3 AM class. As he's got one of the Hypercars up his inside now. What was not ideal. It's going to compromise his exit out of the last corner. It's going to give Sachin Sobers a bit of a gap though. And that's maybe what he needed to now try and get him out of his slipstream, because that is what's so important here, especially in these GT3s.
Certainly is. It's a case of nip one, pearl one, drop one, curl one every time you come through these tight and slow apexes and then get back on the power again. So the drivers trying to work their way through. Brendan Warner just trying to pull 7 seconds clear now of Josh Lipetri, who is there in the McLaren in second position. They fly through Curva Grande. Brendan Warner third in GT, leading in the AM class, but thinking, well, I've got enough of a gap on Lipetri that I can actually start to think about overall podium spots, and he's currently in third position, stretching away from Jamie Zalewski, so not bad going. Not a lot of change up at the front end of the field in the hypercar category, so let's look back in GT. We've got John Mayer hustling Vinicius Gonçalves for 5th position. There's not much change between these two at all, which means that the man up in front of them, JT Tammy, might start to get a little bit edgy before long, because if Mayer can get past Gonçalves, he's definitely going to be having a go at the Aston Martin Vantage next.
I have a feeling there was a bit of a moment for Alain Lefrançois. He's dropped down the order massively. He's now down in P35. Talking about Daniel Kirby, though, for a second. He's behind that. That's a massive crash, though, for the Audi.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a trip back to pit lane for sure, if he can even make it back.
Sorry, Dan. We seem to have lost Timon Suvic. Timon Suvic appears to have disappeared, or at least he's dropped back to 12th position. Does that mean he's made a pit stop already?
Yes, he has made a pit stop. So that was panic station for a moment there. 12 laps into this race, Timon Suvic has made his first pit stop. Bradley Sellers is now in the lead. Here we have a replay from the Audi. This was a bit later on after that happened. Here we go. This is... It's like I said at the top of the show. It's just that second Lesmo onto the curb, and it even happened before the curb, I think, where he got out of shape. And yeah, there's just no holding it from that point. Trundling back to pit lane now, and that's going to be a long old repair for the Audi, and that means that he is out with any shots of a respectable position here in this race.
Very unfortunate for Vinicius Gonçalves. Very sad to see him dropping the Audi into the wall at full chat, and that's... as you say, Dan, that could well be a game-changing, certainly a game-ending scenario. As Schultz continues on, Dahlgren is now in second because Bradley Sellers has decided to come into the pits. So that's both of the leaders at the early phase of the race then, because obviously Timon Suvic was your race leader, then he handed the lead to Bradley Sellers. So now we've got a third leader, that is Alexander Schultz in his Acura. As we watch the battle for second place in the GT AM category class, this is Josh Lipetri versus Stuart Barge as they duel away for second position down the Seraglio.
Josh Lipetri, the gap though to Stuart Barge has stayed the same for quite a while. It's Stuart Barge who gains back on the straights, then into the corners, loses a bit again. You can see it on entry there as well. It's just Josh Lipetri just a bit more confident seemingly in that in that McLaren. And I think the thing is that Josh Lipetri has a bit more front end than Stuart Barge had, courtesy of course of that little bit of weight that comes off the GT3s of Josh Lipetri ahead. You can see what that straight line does though, a little bit wide though for Stuart Barge. It's going to mean he's going to lose a couple of tenths, valuable tenths though in this race, and he's got to make that all up again. But that was rather close, I have to say.
So down the main straight, regroup, try again, says Stuart Barge, as we are going to look at a replay. This is the CMS Peugeot, getting it all untidy, all very wrong indeed.
That's John Ewan.
That is John Oyan. So unfortunately, that's not the first time that we've seen John Oyan drop the plot there. And he's not the only one to do so.
Ross Smith, though, up into P3. Well, of course, when I say that, drops back down to P4. Is in pit lane, I think, is Ross Smith. Alexander Schultz into pit lane as well. So those two opting to pit now. That has promoted Magnus Dahlgren up into P1. Tom Lane into P2 in the Porsche. Glamour Benche ahead of Philippe Enrique in the Acura. Here we can see that in between those two, I think it was John Ewan of the Hypercar Pro class, of course. But so far, I would say this race is slowly developing into something. The start was okay. No one really had too much issues apart from John Ewan and, of course, our pole sitter in qualifying, Daniel Kirby, of course, had some kind of issue which made him drop out of the server, had to come back in, is now at the moment in P33, making his pit stop at the moment, so dropping down the order again. But overtaking the GT field, and, well, you have to start somewhere. Usually that's by overtaking the GT field.
Well, that's a big mistake there for Barge, who managed to get through Lipetri and then has let him go again. So the two of them continue to battle as into the pits, I do believe, comes Magnus Dahlgren. I tell you what, this lead change battle that we've got going on at the front end of the field, it's very reminiscent of the Italian Grand Prix of '95 when you had Lacey was leading, then he pit in, Berger was leading, then he pit in, Herbert was leading, then he pit in, Barrichello was leading, then he pitted in, and Hakkinen was leading, and then he pitted in. So they've all had their turn for one lap at least, leading the race here at Monza as we look at the net leader, if you like, Timon Suvic, the man who was leading the race initially, and of course will take back the lead when Dahlgren and Lane have committed to their pit stops. Mind you, I thought I saw Dahlgren in the pits. He hasn't come in, but Tom Lane has. Oh no, he has come in, my apologies. So Dahlgren and Lane both deciding then to come into the pits on this occasion. So Timon Suvic is handed back the lead. Interestingly, Alexander Schultz is handed back second place. What happened to Bradley Sellers? They seem to have a really slow pit stop.
Well, it's now a 1-2 for both Acuras. That is one of the Porsches I think of. Was that Tom Lane coming out of pit lane? He has dropped down below Bradley Sellers. Magnus Dahlgren is well ahead of him now. But Tom Lane might have well spun it on pit exit. Coming out of pit lane, cold tires maybe, if he changed. Was it Tom Lane? Was it not? It was not, because that is one of the Acuras, and Tom Lane is in a Porsche trying to spin turn it. That obviously...
Oh, no.
And then the wait. Now he can go back and... Oh God, he's going for it again!
Oh dear, this is a Pedro Lamy job, isn't it? This is making a real hash of the recovery here. So, unfortunately, this is a race that was going very, very well at one point, and now they can't even quite find the way forward. You'd be forgiven for thinking there was a driver and a passenger in the car, and they were arguing about the map. And as a result of that, look at the smoke that is now coming off Philip Enrique's car. He's overheated the car, trying to get it going again.
Was it Philippe Enrique who had that spin there in the first corner, or exit of the first corner? Might have been. This is Magnus Dahlgren, who is chasing down, I think, Tony McCoffin ahead of him. Now, there's an interesting battle, because haven't seen Tony too much in this race so far. And he's worked his way up into P4, has made a pit stop, as now Magnus Dahlgren goes past, gets up into P4, and is underway once again. Love the livery, though, on that Ferrari. Looks stunning.
It really does. Magnus Dahlgren in fighter pilot mode as he makes his move there on Tony McCoffin. Oliver Newman currently in P6, then Ross Smith, Gilles Lalonde, Brian Hall, and Wouter de Bruin. It's amazing, isn't it, how things have changed quite dramatically over time. There's still quite a few drivers that have yet to come in for their first stop by the look of it. I would say McCoffin, Newman maybe, or did Newman pit very, very early into the race, I wonder? Maybe that's what's happened. Might be a couple of drivers that decided, very early on to make the pit stop. Sebastian Esposito has just made the pit stop. And obviously we know that Tom Lane in the Manta Squid has as well. As off the road goes Jamie Zalewski right in front of Tony McCoffin. That was a bit of a wake-up call.
Well, that was not ideal. It has given him a bit of a gap now, though. 1.6 seconds is the gap. And he can work with that. He's out of a slipstream now. He can focus on himself. Because even though you would say, Jake, that if a car is 8/10 behind you, you wouldn't lose too much. You're still using some of your brain power. Looking where that car is. This is a big snap, though, for Magnus Dahlgren. That's going to lose in time through Ascari. Tony McCoffin has had the same, I think. Didn't gain too much in Ascari, but what I was saying was that if that car is 8, 7 tenths behind you, you do use some of your brain power to just constantly look where that car is if you don't have to defend. And it does slow you down, even if it's just 2, 3 tenths. It does slow you down if you're under attack from someone. And if you have a bit of a gap, like Magnus Dahlgren has now 2 seconds back to Tony, it does ease that pressure a little bit, and it does make you focus on yourself a bit more.
Well, this is interesting because we've now got the difference between the drivers that came in early and the drivers that have just been in for their stops. Because Tony McCofferman, he had an early pit stop, as did Oliver Newman, and they are now 5th and 7th. So getting out of the melee, as it were, getting out of the chaos and the fisticuffs of the traffic, they've actually built a nice rhythm here. So Tony McCofferman being in 5th position is correct, and that is not a net 5th position, that is a genuine 5th position. So a very nice work indeed from the boys there in the Porsche. And at the inside, that is Timon Suvic trying not to trip over the back markers. He's the real winner from the pit stops, isn't he? Because he had a very decent lead going into the pit stop strategy. Now he finds himself a dozen seconds pretty much clear of Schultz and Sellers. He's got himself into a perfect rhythm, and knowing that he doesn't have Dan Kirby to worry about, he has got himself well clear in the lead. And of course, Dan Kirby is in this race, albeit 2 laps down. So, oh, there's been an incident at turn 1. We've had a spin at turn 1. So that's one of the hypercars going off there. We need to figure out who it is that's gone.
Jason Whitehead, I feel like... Yeah,
it is Whitehead, you're right. So let's see what happened. Oh, well, he's already there at the scene of this. Oh, that's happened at breaking point for Jason Whitehead. They're lapping one of the Acuras. Oh, and that's either poor decision making for the car in front, or Whitehead just didn't sense that the car was going to start braking in front. Oh, tricky to know who caused that.
What I feel like, Jake, there has happened is that he did not see that Acura in front. And the Cadillac did. The Cadillac starts braking early to try and call.
Oh, yeah.
Too much. And he did not adjust for that. And, well, this is the result.
Well, that was the sim racing equivalent of the Mitsunori Takaboshi Super GT crash last year at Fuji, wasn't it? He just didn't see the car in front that was slow, slammed on the brakes, and there was nothing Jason Whitehead could do to get out of the way in time without causing an accident. So, big issue, and that's almost certainly now put him out of the race, Jason Whitehead, because there's no way the car is going to be drivable after that.
No. Also, if you do make an adjustment under braking, of course, the car is already completely loaded up on the front. If you then make an adjustment, as desperate as he did to try and get out of the way, not hit the Cadillac, then, well, your rear end is going to have some trouble. There's no weight on the back, and, well, that was the result of that. And, well, that has probably, like you said, put him out of the race.
Right, time to cue up the Jaws music, because Bradley Sellers is being caught by Alexander Schultz, because they were in opposing positions, but now Alexander Schultz wants his second position back, and Bradley Sellers is trying to run away and hide, but that Acura, which is looking pretty menacing in his rearview mirrors, pushing on. There's also a sizable battle going on in GT, because Brendan Warner has taken the lead here from Becky Ely, but this is pretty much GT pit stop window now, so we're going to see some frantic pit lane activity from the GTs very shortly.
We are over the halfway point in this race, so that would mean only one pit stop needed for the GTs. Now, I did expect only one pit stop coming into this. If I look at my timing screen, that tells me that some drivers have already pitted in the GT class and are going to have to go for a second. One of those drivers is Becky Ely, who's pitted very early on. Some drivers have not even pitted yet, and there are drivers that have made 2 pit stops already. So, yeah, it's a bit all over the place in the GT3 field, and trying to figure out who's doing what, yeah, is a bit of a, it's a bit of a mess in terms of pit stops for the GTs at the moment, but, yeah, we'll work it out to the end, I guess.
Well, let's look at who hasn't pitted. That's where we can really pick up the narrative in GT. So JT Tammy is currently the leader in the GT category in the Champion Aston. They haven't pitted yet, nor has Peter Mayer or James Walker in the McLaren, nor has Gilles Villeneuve in the Lexus, or interestingly, Jamie Zadecki in the Acura has apparently not pitted either, despite dropping down the order quite rapidly. So I'm not sure whether that's an incident from Jamie Zadecki we didn't see, or a pit stop that hasn't been registered. Whatever it might be, it's certainly not gone well for Zalecki over time. However, we are waiting for the pit stop from Messrs. Tammy, Mayer and Walker. That'll be very soon indeed. As still this battle between Sellers and Schultz rumbles on. And of course, we can't forget the fact that the Hypercars will need to come in a second time, and potentially a third time, based on what Ross was telling us.
It's an overtake from Brian. Gilles Lalonde back into P8 now. That is the livery I think that Peugeot used in the real life 24 hours of Le Mans. I must say, it looks stunning, that livery. When they did reveal it, I was like, okay, this is the kind of livery that I expected from Peugeot, being back at Le Mans after so many years. So yeah, stunning livery. Did not help him though in that fight. The BMW of Walter de Bruyn passed into P7. Gilles Lalonde back down into P8.
Certainly 9 out of 10 for appearance, but 2 out of 10 for execution, isn't it? So it hasn't quite gone well on that occasion for Gilles Lalonde. There's still time. There's still plenty of racing opportunities for him to come forward. So let's update you on the way things currently are. Timon Sudik in the Kowalski Acura is your race leader. He's got about 12 seconds on Bradley Sellers and Alexander Schultz, who are still battling away for second position. There they are, currently in the first chicane into the Rettifilio, and then back up the horsepower, back up the gears they go through the Curva Grande. Fourth place at the moment is Magnus Dahlgren in the Ferrari, and he's having a fairly comfortable run really in fourth position. He hasn't got a massive amount of issues from Ross Smith, who is in fifth position in the Acura. There he is. You can just about see him in the background. You can just about make him out in the mirrors if you're squinting, if you're Magnus Dahlgren. But Smith has got pressure from Tony McGoffin in the Toyota right behind him, in the Porsche, sorry, right behind him. So still giving him plenty of chase. And then you've got Newman, De Bruyn, Lalonde and Brian Hall. Oh, that's gone very badly wrong for Oliver Newman. He lost the back end of the car and essentially ended up having all sorts of problems to deal with.
Now, it's that Bencher behind him who's going to try and overtake him. It's not Bencher, of course, in the Cadillac.
It's De Bruyn.
Yeah, it's De Bruyn, but that's not for class position, luckily for Newman. Not ideal, though. De Bruyn got past. He's now behind one of the Lexus cars, and he gets past that as well. Not ideal. Also not ideal for the Peugeot behind that, who's trying to make his way through.
So yeah, Gilles Lalonde dropping it, trying to squeeze his way past Oliver Newman. And then behind him, you've got the Momo car that I think is a lap down, actually. So that's obviously causing a couple of issues. I think that's Sebastian Esposito, from the best of my knowledge, who's just come through the second. Here we go, Gilles Lalonde. Diving through on the inside of Walter de Bruyn. No chance. You're going to have to make a much stronger move on Walter de Bruyn. He wasn't born yesterday.
It was Newman, I think, that he tried to make that pass on. It is.
It's Newman. My apologies. It is Newman.
Walter de Bruyn is a bit further up ahead already. And that is the driver who he's trying to re-overtake. However, though, Newman does not want to give this up.
No, indeed. Lalonde is now going to get a little bit of side draft here from Oliver Newman, but there's a bit of a distance between them. And watch out behind you, boys, because you've got the Acura. They're going to go 3 wide down the straight up to the first chicane. And so it's going to be Oliver Newman that hangs on to it for the time being. Gilles Lalonde managing to cover off. Oh, that was beautiful stuff between the three of them. They came across the line almost in a dead heat, 3 wide there on the run to the Rettifilio. That is what this place is so good at.
7 seconds now from Walter de Bruyn to Tony McGoffin in P6. He's got to try and close that gap up. However, though, Gilles Lalonde caught back up to Brian Hall.
Well, Brian Hall managed to get past both of them in one go, didn't he?
Yeah. I think Brian Hall indeed managed to get past, and now Gilles Lalonde trying to re-overtake him. Gilles Lalonde has had a rough couple of laps here. The last 2 laps were not ideal for the Peugeot. Like we said, that livery stunning, but at the moment is in a bit of a rough spot. Gilles Lalonde trying to get back into the groove It's so difficult though, Jake, once you're in the car and you're in a certain rhythm, and then all of a sudden cars are flying past left, right, and center. Not only because they are just quicker, well, also because you've been slowed down massively. You've lost so much momentum from one overtake, and then all of a sudden 5 cars are flying past from your same, from the same class. So yeah, you can easily lose your rhythm once that happens, and that's, I think, what happened to Gilles Lalonde as well. He's got to try and gather himself back up, try and haul into pit lane though, so he gets at least one position back.
So at the end of his stint, Brian Hall is definitely the one with bragging rights at the end of that. Did you see the way I got past both of them on the main straight? That was a bit sweet. A very nice run indeed there from Brian Hall, as he now leaves Gilles Lalonde to lick his wounds in the Peugeot, who is currently now in 8th position. Still no change up front. Subic, Sellers and Schultz. As we approach the second round of pit stops, we can see that, of course, from Brian Hall, having come in for the second time. Now, Brian Hall was one of the drivers who came in early, I do believe, last time. So the fact that he will now exit the pits, having had a second stop, that will really benefit him in the long term. It's one of those short-term loss, long-term gain strategies for him. But he is the first of the big players, Brian Hall, to really go for a second stop. Others that have, by the way, are Jerry Chen in the Flying Kiwi Porsche and John Ouyan in his CMS Peugeot. By the way, speaking of CMS Pro Peugeot, John Ouyan is currently 18th. Guess who's 19th? Dan Kirby. That's how much time he's made up already. He is not on 1 lap deficit to the leader yet. He's still 2 laps down for the leader, but he's already completely disappeared past the GTs.
Now, do keep in mind, I think John Ewan has made 2 pit stops, Daniel Kirby only 1. So it looks like Daniel Kirby has caught up completely to John Ewan, but it is a pit stop more, though, for John Ewan, so he will have to make 1 pit stop. One thing that's good, though, for Daniel Kirby is the fact that he's in front of the GT field. Now, of course, once you're behind them, there is no blue flag. You are racing them for position, which makes it a bit more difficult because the cars won't know that you're coming up as easily as they are when you are lapping them. So it should be a bit easier getting through the GT traffic now for Daniel Kirby.
Well, those who are playing the Champion Motorsports VWSC drinking game, that's the obligatory blue flag mention to wake up James Parfitt. Well done, Dan. Nicely done. As we continue on into the race battle, the 2 CMS Pro Peugeots cantering on, John Ouyan and Dan Kirby, now into the top 20. So a race of real frustration, really, for Ewan and Kirby. But I'm afraid it's not going to be a victory for either car, is it? It's just been one of those days, and it'll be, well, very frustrating indeed for both drivers who are sitting there desperately trying to find a reason to keep pushing at this level, desperately trying to find, some kind of solace in what they're doing. But they are 16th and 17th in class. They are 18th and 19th overall. And John Ouyan is about 14 seconds away from Norm Graf in the Cadillac. So a lot of time to make up.
Now, there is a lap in between the 2, though. So this is not position. There is a lap between the 2. So he hasn't magically made up a lap, or John Ewan hasn't had too bad of a race that he's lost the lap. So yeah, Daniel Kirby still a lap behind John Ewan, so he's got to take it easy, especially when it's your teammate. You want to make sure when your teammate is still in a fight for this race that you don't that he doesn't lose time when you're overtaking him. At the same time, though, if he is able to overtake him, I have a feeling that Daniel Kirby might be 2-3 tenths a lap quicker than John Ewan ahead of him, so he might be able to even put him through.
Well, they've got Timon Subic coming out of pit lane right in front of them. That could have caused a bit of a headache. Timon Subic having just made his second pit stop, by the way, from the lead. So that could have been a bit of a headache. But look at the gap between Jerry Chen and Dan Kirby in terms of race position now in class. He's got to make up about a minute or so if he wants to be anywhere near competitive. As coming out onto the circuit, that is actually Jerry Chen, having just made the pit stop. So when Dan Kirby makes his second stop, the roles are going to be reversed, of course. So you can kind of make heads or tails of how that's worked out. Johnny Young has lost 2 laps, and so too has Jerry Chen in the Kiwi Porsche. Not entirely sure how that's happened for Jerry, who, of course, we've seen at the front end of races. But 2023, Just hasn't really been his season, has it? He's had all sorts
Look
of
at that! Look at that!
misfortunes.
Jake. Sorry to interrupt, but the windscreen wipers are on. It's raining out.
It's
on
raining
track.
at Monza. Oh my goodness!
This is a curveball, one that we weren't expecting. We thought it was just gonna be when the race was gonna finish, but
Oh my word!
it hit us.
Well, this is going to get spicy from here on in. And don't forget, of course, they don't have intermediate tyres. They only have different compounds of dry and wets. So now it comes down to, when do you change tyres? When do you stay out? You know, how long are you prepared to stay out for? How long is the rain going to be there for? Nobody coming into pits yet, and we've got an absolute stagger of cars making their way down the straight at full chat, and they've got to find a way to get the brakes on down to the Rettifilo with the rain coming down at Monza. It's not monsoon conditions yet, but it's certainly getting very heavy in places on the circuit. We were not sure whether rain would actually intervene here at Monza, and it has in the critical closing stages of this race.
I did see it. All of a sudden, it became a lot more overcast, and I didn't want to mention it, not to jinx anyone, but even without me mentioning it, the rain has hit us. And yeah, like you said, some places of the track a lot heavier than at others. So that's also something, when it might be just lightly raining going into the Rettifilo, when you go into Della Roggia, it might be completely wet already on track. So that's something that the drivers are going to have to make a decision about. When do you pit? When do you know it's better to go onto the wets? It's a complete field. Look how hard they're having to fight the cars, though. That's Eugene Mazdur in the Ferrari that we're looking with, trying to chase down Peter Meyer. But this track is getting more and more slippery with the lap.
We're not quite at the GT4 European Series second race earlier this season at Paul Ricard, when about this time left to go in the race, we had a massive rain shower. And, well, there was a genuine shout as to whether you come in for wet tyres or not, and the drivers that were on wets compared to the drivers were making up a minute per lap. It hasn't quite got to that stage yet, but I tell you what, the drivers will definitely be feeling the pinch out there here at Monza as you desperately try not to put too much throttle application in. You've got to try really careful here to hold it together as we watch the leading battle in GT. This is Becky Ely and Sachin Sobers, both of whom have pitted for the first time, by the way. So this is the accurate positions in GT. But now we've got an interesting duel for position in terms of the pit stops for the Hypercars. Do they make a pit stop for wet tyres at their second stop, or do they stay on dries? That is an absolute conundrum now. And we're halfway through that pit stop sequence because we've had both of the Acuras come in. Timon Suvic went on to dries, I do believe. And so too did the Acura of Alexander Schultz. And so did Bradley Sellers. But if the rain gets heavier, the likes of Dahlgren, Lane, and some of the others that have left this very late might actually get the most momentous of bonuses.
Man, it's Dahlgren into the pits now. So what is he going to choose for? Is he going to take the risk? And is he going to go on to wets? Maybe hoping for the fact that the rain is going to get heavier throughout this race. Now 14 minutes left, and they're fighting their cars. We had rain at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park as well, and it absolutely threw the race on its head. So we might well see the same ace. Stay off the white lines, though. That's a general rule of thumbs when it comes to rain. There's contact between the two. Becky Ely, though, pushes Sachin Sobers off the track. They're both struggling for grip on the exit of the Rettifilo. Both get underway and stay in the same positions. Have another look at that. This is how I think Becky Ely was looking at that. There's the contact. Sachin Sobers. Becky Ely says, no, sir, you're not going to make it through that way. Slams the door, and Sachin Sobers has to wait till Becky Ely rejoins the track and both get going again. Both in the same positions as they were before.
Do you know what? That was perfect from both of them. The mistake from Sachin Sobers, he didn't overreact. He just let the car drift in. Becky Ely responded, nope, you're not having a cheap overtake on me. That was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. No problems at all with that. And in the background, I think we just lost the Mercedes of Brendan Warner. Brendan Warner, I think, just dropped it in the background on the second Lesmo. The back end was kicking out big time. He's lost the position on the road, but I don't think he's actually lost the car. I think he just managed to save it. But that just shows you how tricky it is.
One thing that's good for the drivers that's helping them is the fact that the track temperature is 48.7 degrees and is not coming down rapidly, staying the same.
Oh!
There's another go at it. He gets it. What a move on the outside as well.
Sobers is through round the outside of Becky Ely. That is an absolute heart stopper for Becky. Fabulous move though from Sachin Sobers. More confidence on the brakes into the curve of Alboreto. Now Becky Ely's got to try and fight back. This is what greasy, tricky, slippery conditions on slick tyres breeds here at Monza. And now Sachin Sobers has got to be basically got to be the gopher into the first corner on the brakes in the hope that he can get the car stopped. Becky Ely can respond to what Sachin Sobers does. So this might not necessarily be a bad place for Becky Ely to be in second position within touching distance of Sachin Sobers' Mercedes, just to give him all of the disadvantages of arriving on the scene first. But as you can see, the rain's still coming down here at Monza, and the wetter it gets, the tougher it's going to be to justify staying on slick tyres. But we have minutes left of this race. So every single decision you make from here on in is a lose or win situation.
The weather radar in between. Lap times for the Hypercars are down about 6 seconds. So the track is getting a lot slower, but this rain should pass in about 4 to 5 minutes. It should get lighter in about 2. So if my weather radar is correct, then the rain should stop in about 5 minutes, which will leave about a 5-minute period to dry up again. Of course, the rain is not too heavy, so it won't make too much of a difference so far if it dries up now. But yeah, the drivers are going to have to struggle and are going to, I have to think, stick it out on the slicks, because going for wets now might be one too early. And looking at the forecast, it might not be worth it.
So there are some damp patches materializing on the course as well. That's not going to be helpful for any driver still on slicks. And I think pretty much everybody has decided to remain on slicks because they know this is only going to be a brief shower rather than a full monsoon. So you've just got to hang in there and hope. As into the pits comes one of the Acuras, I believe. That might be George Angelidis coming into the pits. So
Where he goes to.
Check out the damp patches down the straight. You hit one of those under brakes, you are going straight to the wall.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Suvic, though, this is crucial for him. He has 21 seconds in the lead. If he pits, this is slow pace now from Timon Suvic. 1:42.584 for him last time round. Quickest lap in this race, 1:34.719. They're about 8 seconds slower than they were in the dry before, so it might well be worth it to just switch on to wets for one or two of the drivers who are at the back of the field anyways, just to try something, because, well, it's a low risk and maybe a high reward game for them. For Timon Suvic, it's the other way around. High risk and maybe no reward if he pits now.
Yeah, the only two drivers in the entire field that I would say, why not just go on to wets and see what happens, are the CMS Pro Peugeots. You may as well. You're already down the order. You're not going to lose a massive amount of positions. You may as well just roll the dice, because you could end up coming out as heroes rather than very disappointed adversaries. So for Timon Suvic, he's just got to tiptoe. He absolutely has to be so measured on the throttle. You've got to be so careful, especially when lapping traffic as well. That can't help either. Down the straight. Again, you won't be full throttle here. You'll be about 3/4 of the way down the pedal. Then you'll open up onto the throttle about here. And again, you'll come off it about 50 meters earlier than you would. Slow the car down, then brake. Dab, dab, dab the brake, dab the brake. Try not to hit that wet patch, which he just has. Somehow, Philippe Enrique has managed to get that car turned in.
No ABS. No ABS. Guilherme Benke seems to be on wets, we're getting informed, and he is gaining though on Philippe Enrique.
Look at that graphic. Look how quickly he's catching.
Yeah. It's going to be crucial now. Philippe Enrique has to make a decision here. But there's, I think for Philippe, he needs to stick it out. The decision is already too late. Rain is decreasing though. So that might switch into the favor of Felipe Enrique in a couple of laps' time. So I think for the drivers that haven't pitted yet, with about 7 minutes to go, a little bit more in this race, you've just got to stick it out. Look at how they're grabbing, though. This is such slow pace, and he's getting about 4 seconds only in the first.
Oh, off the road. Yeah, that's the problem. You leave it too late, you leave it too long on the dry tyres, and the rain gets heavy enough that you've got Guillermo Benchke deciding, do you know what, this isn't worth the risk. I'm going on to the wets and just seeing what happens. This could end up playing into Benchke's hands just by virtue of the fact that he's made the sensible decision. Enrique would have lost about 3 seconds in that, I would have thought. So this gap is absolutely going to annihilate. But this is the thing, with you saying, Dan, that the rain is stopping, again, the air temperature is quite high, but will it drain enough to make the slick tyres the better choice? Or will Benchke, who has now got the tyres pretty much how he likes them in the wet, will they go the distance perhaps more than a worn slick would?
Suvik made a mistake. That gap has come down massively on my timing screen just now. It was 23 seconds, it's 12 seconds now. He's into the pits, I think, isn't he?
He's got no choice, that's the problem. He's got absolutely no choice. So down the straight.
Simon Suvik has made a massive mistake. He's into the pits, I think. Yes, he is. That has allowed Bradley Sellers to go up into the lead. Magnus Dorgan goes past as well. But with about 6 minutes to go, which would be, Jake, I would say about 5, maybe 4 laps, he could make up what he just lost.
But what does Suvik do? That's the thing. What does he do? Does he go wet? Does he go dry? Because at the moment, the wet tyres does appear to be the sensible option. Look at the lap times of Guillermo Benchke. He's the one who's really worth keeping an eye on in this. He doesn't even need to make the overtake here on Oliver Newman. He doesn't need to pass him at all. He just needs to sit there. He just needs to sit there and wait for it to happen.
A spin in the background as well. I don't know who that was, but that was one of the Acuras, I think. It just tells you how tricky this track is at the moment on the slicks.
What a way to end this. Let's have a look at it again. It's down into the braking zone. Whoops, going off, and then you're on to the wet stuff, straight into the wall.
Straight up aquaplaning, I think that was for him.
Yeah, pure aquaplane. Ugh.
Does manage to get back on track in one time now instead of making a mess of it.
Well, we've also lost Sobers, I believe. We've also lost Sachin Sobers, the former leader in GT. So let's have a look at what's happened. It's the same place. It's at the Della Roggia. He hit the wet patch going in. Dropped the car going off the road. Manages to keep it going in a relatively straight line, though. Unless there's another incident to come. The car does look very squirrely through the first Lesmo. So he comes his way through again into the second Lesmo. Is this where he's going to drop it? We saw Vinicius Gonçalves go off there earlier in the Audi. He's on the curbs. Well, Simon Suvik getting out onto the circuit again after his pit stop. Now, the big question is going to be... Oh, there's a spinner in the background.
John Ewan might be on wets here. He might have listened to what you said. His last lap time, 1:43.637. Last lap time for the leader, Bradley Sellers, 1:47.364. Simon Suvik, 2 minutes 32. That's with that pit stop, though. So he's lost heaps and heaps amount of time. Is 22.5 seconds behind Magnus Dahlgren. Is he able to make that up on the wets? Has he gone for wets? We don't know. Track temperature is still about 48 degrees. But this, for sure, Jake, is wet territory. You can't go on this, or well, you can't go further on the dries anymore without losing heaps and heaps amount of time.
Yeah, look at the spray. There's no way this is going to dry out before the finish. It's wet tyres all the way. The problem is, if you've committed to the slicks now, you kind of have to stick it out because the amount of time that you're going to lose in the pit stop added to it is going to ruin your race anyway. So anybody that decided to go onto wet tyres at their final stop is an absolute genius now in the final couple of minutes. The fine line in these situations between genius and fool is rather cruel, but this is motor racing, and this is where you've really got to count your chickens before they hatch sometimes. There is your man, Alexander Schultz, having come into the pits. He's down to 10th position now behind Brian Hall. But if you made the switch to wet tyres at the right time, you are an absolute legend at this point. So both Brian Hall and Alexander Schultz have gone on to wet tyres. Now, this is where this race can potentially be won and lost.
I'm keeping a keen eye on my timing screens because I want to see what kind of lap time Timon Suvik is able to put in. 1:47.241 for Bradley Sellers, 1:45.501 for Magnus Dahlgren. That gap's coming down as well. It's 1.7 now between the two, and that is for the leading class, both on dries.
Yeah, they're both on dries, but they are going to be caught hand over fist by the drivers on wets in the closing stages. I noticed that Oliver Newman in the BMW dropped it at the Variante della Roggia, and that's how Hall and Schultz got their way into 8th and 9th place. Look at the lack of traction from Timon Suvik, who had this race pretty much sewn up at one stage. It was pretty much done and dusted for him, and this rain has absolutely ruined their strategy. He's 17 seconds, 18 seconds ahead of Tony McCoffervan, trying to not trip over the traffic. He was just getting past Gilles Villeneuve in the Lexus, but he manages to negotiate the chicane just.
Last lap, 1:47.968 for Timon Suvik. That was not quicker than either Magnus Dahlgren or Bradley Sellers up ahead of him. So he needs some magical stuff to happen here if he wants to catch, but he's not quicker. And this is what I said, even though it looks like it's completely wet now, he's not gaining that much. 1:47 is the same as the leader did, Bradley Sellers, last time round. This is the battle for the lead, though. Magnus Dahlgren, they're surely going on to the last lap right now.
Big washout from Bradley Sellers. Surely Magnus Dahlgren's going to get the opportunity here. Now, another question we have to ask while this battle is going on, Dan. Lift and coast. Surely that must be now what the leaders have got to commit to in terms of strategy now as well, to avoid a third pit stop, because they will be absolutely hammer blown by the drivers behind them who have made a third stop. So because the rain has come, the lap times are slower, the fuel consumption should be less, so they can essentially just lift and coast it to the line. But how much of a gamble do you do that with when you're battling for the lead as well? Dahlgren trying to come around the outside of the Curva Grande to get through on Bradley Sellers. Both drivers with minimal grip. Both of them on a lift and coast strategy to avoid a third stop. Both of them desperately trying to get the car stopped into the braking zones. And both of them at risk of throwing this away at any moment. Big wobble from Bradley Sellers. Here comes Magnus Dahlgren, now trying to go the long way round into the first Lesmo. Sellers is sending in there in the BMW as they tiptoe their way through the first apex. Back on the throttle again. Sellers isn't going to have the same purchase. Does Dahlgren commit into the second Lesmo? Surely not. He has to bail out of it and wait for a run down the Seraglio. A big washout from Sellers. That'll do it. Dahlgren is in the lead.
Good overtake by Magnus Dahlgren, though, gets it done. And now already has a bit of a gap. Bradley Sellers clearly struggling way more than the Ferrari is. Last time round, though, for Timon Suvik, 1:45.321. But it's going to be too little too late, I think. It's going to be Magnus Dahlgren or Bradley Sellers who's going to take the victory here. It's all going to come down to that last corner, though.
It's going to be patience that is needed big time here as Magnus Dahlgren tries to keep it together heading into the Curva Alboreto. Keep it calm, keep it tidy. This has been one of those races worth waiting for, worth tuning in for. If you've only just joined us, go back to the start and do it all again, because Magnus Dahlgren is going to have the moment of magic in fantastic fashion. Magnus Dahlgren under pressure all the way through in the closing stages. But what a terrific run. What a brilliant battle. And Magnus Dahlgren has just managed to snatch it from Bradley Sellers in the closing stages. He can celebrate. Yes, Magnus, you were there when it mattered. Calm, cool, and collected. And Magnus Dahlgren steals the win on the final lap at Monza. Brilliant.
What a drive from him. I mean, that was exactly what he needed. Timon Suvik gambled, didn't get it. And, well, it's what I said. It looked completely wet. But somehow, those dry runners were able to keep up with the pace of the wet runners. It did change, though, towards the last two laps. But it was too little too late for those who pitted for wets. Newman wins in the AM class as well. Ely in the LMGT3. And Barge in the LMGT3 AM. All of them had to make that difficult decision. Do we go to wets or do we stay on dries?
What a fabulous drive this is from Becky Ely and from Oliver Newman as well, actually. They both gave as good as they got when it mattered. An excellent run to the flag as Oliver Newman takes the AM Hypercar victory. Becky Ely gets the job done in GTs up in front. Here comes Oliver Newman to win in the Hypercar AM category. He's had flotsam and jetsam all around him. But what a fabulous run from Oliver Newman. A great victory. And here comes Stuart Barge, splashing his way down the straight up to the Curva Alboreto to finish off in magnificent fashion as the HPD Acura comes through for the victory. Well, what about that? In all 4 categories, we've had a Ferrari win, we've had a BMW win, and across the GTs, we've had Acuras win. What a great day it's been as Stuart Barge almost chucks it into the chicken house in the final turn. No chance, though. He gets it done. Stuart Barge comes home for the win in fine style. But what a race it has been here at Monza. Just when we thought it was predictable, just when everybody was getting ready for another Dan Kirby washout, everybody was washed out. And Magnus Dahlgren was the one who emerged through the puddles to a fabulous win here at Monza. What a brilliant final duel between Magnus Dahlgren and Bradley Sellers. And Magnus Dahlgren in the Emmy Racing Ferrari, able to come through for the victory. So let's run you through our breakdown. Magnus Dahlgren in front of Bradley Sellers in the BMW and Timon Suvic in the Acura. Tony McCoffervan in the Porsche and Gilles Lalonde in the Peugeot. 5 different manufacturers in the top 5 places. Tom Lane in the Manta Squid Porsche in front of Wout de Bruin in the rookie BMW. And then Alexander Schultz, so close, but down to 8th position in the end. Oliver Newman, the winner in the AM class, and Brian Hall in 10th position. Then Ross Smith in the Noon Acura in front of Norm Graff in the Cadillac, 11th and 12th for those two. What a disappointing race in the end for the CMS Pro Peugeots. John Uyan unable to get the job done in 13th in the end, having lost a lap. Sebastian Esposito in the Ferrari, Jerry Chen in the Flying Kiwi Porsche, Guillermo Benchke in the Cadillac. Dan Kirby barely started the race at all, lost 2 laps and ended up staying down in the doldrums, 17th for him. George Angelidis in his HPD Acura, Philippe Enrique in the Acura in 19th place, and then Benjamin Portis-Heath in his Toyota. Despite tripping over the road a few times, he came through in 20th place. Take a bow in 21st position. The winner in the GT category, Becky Ely. Quite sensational circumstances. She drove like an absolute legend out there to hang on to the victory, despite all the pressure and all of the difficulties going on around her. And we'll definitely hear from Becky Ely before the end of the broadcast. In fact, we already have Magnus Dahlgren, Oliver Newman, and Becky Ely all waiting to talk to us. But what a fabulous, fabulous battle it has been from them. Wow, what a terrific job it was. So we're going to wrap it up by chatting to our drivers after a sensational run. All 4 of our class winners are in the waiting room. So let's go straight in with Stuart Barge. I think we'll go from the lower class to the front class. And Stuart Barge was the last one we saw home. So he'll be the first one that we speak to in the broadcast booth after a fabulous race battle. So let's grab a word with Stuart Barge after his fabulous run in the HPD Acura to come through to win the GT AM category after a very strong run from Stuart Barge. So let's see if we can grab him in from the waiting room and we'll hear what Stuart Barge has to say. What an incredible race from Stuart Barge, the HPD Acura. A brilliant drive. It was pretty tricky throughout the race, not just in the closing stages, but that one must feel pretty satisfying.
Yeah, very satisfying, very satisfying. I did not expect to have quite the pace I did. And then when it started raining, the NSX just is in its element when it starts to get a little damp.
Well, that race had 3 stages essentially to it, didn't it? Because in the first phase, when the track was really green, it must have been quite straightforward. Then obviously once the track has rubbered in, that's when the tires get really greasy and you're struggling to keep a hold of it. And then the rain came, you got an opportunity to chill out to a certain extent. A very strange race.
Chill out at first, but it got progressively wetter and wetter. And holy cow, if I could have thought I could succeed in going in for a quick change to wets, I would have, because I was giving up 8, 9, and 10 seconds a lap.
So talk to me about throttle application around this place in those conditions, because obviously you're obviously trying desperately to be quite smooth on the throttle around Monza anyway, because it can really chuck you out. But in the wet conditions, that must have been an absolute nightmare.
It was quite interesting. In the AM class, we do have TC, and well, I guess all GT3s do. So I kept playing with the setting on the TC and just trying to be as smooth as I could.
Amazing. I mean, that was right to the edge of what you could achieve there, Stuart. How does this feel now coming to the later rounds of the championship? What does a win do in terms of continuing on the 2023 campaign?
It just gives me more encouragement, really.
Fantastic. So obviously we'll continue to see how that progresses towards the end of the season. Good job, Stuart. Great win here at Monza. Fantastic.
Thank you, Jake.
Right. So after one Acura has triumphed in fantastic style, we're going to hear from the other Acura driver who has taken a win and the overall GT win as well, Becky Ely. After a fabulous run here at Monza. It was never going to be easy, but Becky Ely, right when it matters in terms of the title fight as well, Becky, that's a critical drive, a critical performance, and a tough one, but boy, did you make it entertaining. How was it for you?
It was great fun, and I love your commentary voice, Jake. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Becky. Tell me a little bit about when we got from the dry to the wet, because obviously this circuit changes dramatically in those conditions. But Stuart was telling us, the Acura really comes into its own in the wet conditions. Is that how you were feeling behind the wheel, or was there a little bit more going on than meets the eye?
No, it was just brake a bit earlier, learn the braking zone. Hope Sachin messes up, and he did, very luckily. So, and then just keep calm and keep going. It is a fantastic car in the wet, and I normally go okay in the wet. So, yeah, I just kept hoping. I was looking at how long was left, and I was like, oh, it's close whether a pit stop would be faster or not. I think I'm not going to risk it because if Sachin goes, then I've got a chance to beat him. And if I go, I didn't think that wets were going to come back through in that little time.
I mean, it's a very tough situation when you're in a rock and a hard place. Just how close were you to sort of changing strategy completely? Because I know there were several drivers out there that were umming and ahhing about, do we go wets? Do we stick it out with the slicks? I mean, how many times did you have that conversation with yourself out there?
As soon as it hit 15% rain, I was like, this is going to be like wets weather in no time. It's right on the edge whether pitting is going to be faster or not.
And considering how it played out, obviously, I mean, do you think there could have been an opportunity to sort of change it up, or were you backed into a corner essentially with the time that you had to play with? Did you have to just make that commitment?
If people were confident the rain was going to stay, it was worth pitting straight away. The moment it hit 15%, dive in the pit, you would have made up the time. But checking the weather forecast and stuff, it could have just been a 5-minute shower and then you would have been screwed.
I mean, you definitely made it particularly entertaining right to the end. And heading on to the remainder of the championship, this is obviously a big win considering how tough you were pushed by your opposition. Where does this leave you now for the rest of the campaign?
Oh, nowhere. Like after that engine blow in Le Mans, and then I missed a race because I was ill. That was a high scoring race. That was it. I'm like 40, 50 points down. So even catching up a bit, it's not going to make a difference. I'm in it for fun. And I'll probably end up supporting Jamie to try and help him get the championship later on. We'll see. We'll see how I go and see how he goes leading up to the end.
But I guess it's quite nice to prove the point anyway, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This was my first Saturday, like, outright class win ever. So I'm a lot more over the moon than I sound. I'm quite ill. But I am like, I don't know if you saw, but I was doing donuts till the engine was blowing up after the race.
I think you've earned a rather large mug of Lemsip there, Becky. Go and enjoy yourself. Grab some chicken broth, whatever you need to celebrate. And we'll see you for the next one. Great job. Fantastic drive.
Thank you very much and have a good one. And could I just thank you all, and James in particular, for putting on the show. Like, I love watching it back. It's so good. So thank you to you guys.
Absolutely. A big thanks to James Parfitt. A big thanks to James Parfitt and the whole team. Thank you, Becky. We'll see you out again next time. We have heard from our GT winners. Now we're going to focus in on the hypercar competitors. Let's hear first of all from Oliver Newman, the man who was in the center of everything pretty much at one stage. He had cannons in front of him, cannons behind him, cannons to the left and the right of him. And somehow Oliver Newman still came through it all to grab the Hypercar and victory in class and style. Oliver, very tough racing out there. You just about managed to hold on with so many things going on around you.
Like you say, everything, everywhere, all at once. It was mental, but it was good fun. Everyone was very clean from my end, so I was quite a happy race for me, really.
I mean, considering how insane it was, I think that was a real, from my side, and I'm hoping from your side as well, a real advert for VWSC and Champion Motorsports in general. That could have got really nasty. It could have got really insane. And, you know, a couple of wars could have broken out. But such is the nature of the community, such is the nature of the spirit of competition, that it just ended up being a darn good race.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, everyone was, well, from my end, was very clean. I know there was a couple of incidents, but it happens. It's racing.
So talk us about that critical changeover from the dry to the wet, because I guess from your point of view, again, with the BMW being a bit of an all-rounder, how many conversations with yourself are you having about, you know, can we stick this out on slicks? Do we go wet? How difficult was that little conversation?
Yes. Essentially, I think to myself, unless it's maximum 40% wet, I'm not even thinking about changing to wets. So I pitted just as it started raining, and I thought, right, I'll just go to the end. And just about worked out. It was getting a bit dicey at the end because the BMW struggles, I think, with front end grip, like with a bit of aero wash, especially in traffic. But like the Parabolica, you're going straight, so you have to really think about your braking points.
I mean, from our side, from a viewing perspective, I mean, we got to see just how tricky, but also how solid the BMW is. I mean, is that one of the reasons why you went with this car this year? You wanted something that, no matter what the conditions, the car was going to give you something reasonably predictable.
I'll be completely honest. I went with it because some of my friends have picked it and I wanted to nick their setups.
Fabulous. I love a bit of honesty. In terms of the continuation of the 2023 championship, I mean, how does this victory set things up for the rest of the year? Where does this place you in terms of the psychology of the rest of your preparation for the year? What's your thinking point now? How's your motivation?
I'm pretty motivated because this is only the third race I've done this season. I did Spa, I did the last one and this one, and I missed a couple because of other commitments. But now I'm going to probably cancel future commitments because I feel like I'm doing well and I'm driving very strong at the moment for my normal ability. So got to keep going, got to keep pushing, haven't you?
Perfect. There you go. Oliver Newman's just sacrificed his Saturday nights for the rest of 2023. Thanks very much, Oliver. Great to hear from you. Great job. Well done.
Thank you very much. Can I give a quick shout out to my parents who are watching?
You can.
Hi, Mum. Hi, Dad.
Oh, you're very proud. Very proud of your boy. He did you well. He did you well. He did you well. Brilliant stuff. Go and enjoy it, Oliver. Fantastic, mate.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Right, so that's 3 winners. We have 1 more, and we have saved the king of Monza till last. Magnus Dahlgren himself has come through after what can only be described as a nail-biter right to the wire. I mean, Magnus, if you're going to steal a win, why not do it with all of us on the edge of our seats on the final lap? That was monstrous to watch. How was it to drive?
It was... yeah, crazy, really. Wet, aquaplaning, and still I haven't, sort of wrapped my brain around this, I guess.
I'm guessing going into that race, there was not really much of an eagerness that a win was on, because where you look at where you were in qualifying, you had a quick car, but it was quite clear that Peugeot and Acura were going to dictate how the race played out. Were you even considering the possibility of a win before the start?
No, not at all. I was hoping for a top 5. I started P5, I think, and as you say, the Peugeot and Acuras are a lot quicker than the Ferrari. I'm just quick in the corners, and there's a lot of straight here. So yeah.
So at which point in the race, in that closing sort of 15 minutes or so, at which point did you think, I've just got to stick this out on the slicks. I can't even consider going for the wet tires. I've just got to brave it out. When did that sort of thought process happen?
Well, it started to rain just, I think, 2 laps before I had to make my ordinary pit stop. So when I went in, I remember from the last race how the wets, they are not as well around or not as good in the wet as the softs. So I went with the softs and thought I would have an advantage there.
The other thing I have to ask as well, because it suddenly struck me with about sort of 10, 15 minutes to go. A lot of the hypercars were having to make a third stop. You didn't. And of course, nor did, your rival out there, Bradley Sellers, batting away for the victory. Were you guys having to sort of lift and coast in order to get the car to the end? I mean, obviously, I know that the speed was reduced because of the wet weather, but were there points where you're having to be quite frugal on, how fast you're actually pushing it on that lap as well to make the fuel go the distance?
For me, I didn't really have to do that because I always tend to take a lot of fuel, a bit more fuel than I need, and as you say, the pace or the times were slower, so you sort of have to brake a lot earlier, and you don't use the throttle as much. So no, I didn't really have to conserve fuel. I just had to keep the car on the tarmac.
Fantastic. I mean, you absolutely nailed it in the closing stages. It's a very satisfying win, I'm sure. Heading to the next one, how much of a difference do you think this is going to make to your confidence and your sort of self-motivation moving forward?
I don't know really. I mean, it's fun to win, of course, but I still think I do know where I'm at, so to speak. I'm not, really maybe top 5 podium, P3. That's where I feel I'm at, and I just want to, take this win as it is.
Well, we absolutely loved it. I'm sure you will, and I'm sure everybody will be looking back on this one as a proper VWSC classic in time to come. Magnus, congratulations. You're the winner of the 60 Minutes of Monza. Great job.
Thank you very much, guys. Awesome
Well,
work, by the way.
No, it's been great fun. We've absolutely loved every minute of it. Final word from Dan Pepples. What an absolute thriller. I mean, when we came to the booth today, we thought it was going to be good. We thought it was going to be enjoyable. We had no idea it was going to be a nail-biting classic.
For sure, we didn't. But that rain at the end threw an absolute curveball into what was already a very intriguing race to watch. But yeah, I think that rain just kind of sprinkled, the end of that race, and yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Loved it from start to finish. There wasn't one dull moment in that race where you thought, okay, it's settling down a bit now. There was fighting from P1 all the way down to P40, and yeah, it was all in all, I think, an amazing race.
An amazing race indeed. I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you all, folks. You've got 5 weeks to wait until the next one. Road America, Elkhart Lake is going to be the next venue on the 24th of August. But you can follow all of the interesting and exciting developments of the VWSC on the website, Champions Motorsport and Champions Sim Racing. Join the community, get yourselves involved, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You will never miss a race in the calendar. It has been an absolute classic. From everybody at JPBroadcasting, Storm Gang Simulations and Champion Motorsports, from my colleague Dan Pepples, from myself, Jake Sanson, we hope you've enjoyed the Monza 60 minutes, and we will be back in action for another hour of exciting racing at Road America at Elkhart Lake 5 weeks from now. See you then.